Thank you for attending virtually with us tonight. This is a regular meeting of the Board of Education of Bernards Township. The board has already met in executive session and saluted the flag at that time. The notice of the time and place of this meeting was provided, and copies of the resolution were forwarded to the official newspapers as designated by the Board of Education and to the township clerk, and a copy of the notice was posted on a bulletin board at the Board of Education offices in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act. Due to the public health emergency in the state of New Jersey, as declared in Executive Order 103, the board will be suspending normal meeting procedures this evening and conducting this virtual meeting. Directions for accessing the virtual public meeting were posted at the district website, www.bernardsboe.com, and the same directions were posted at the intended meeting place, but which is unavailable. I'm going to stop right there before I talk about public comment and just say that, as usual, for some reason I have a mental block and I skipped roll call. So, Mr. McLaughlin, if you could please give us a roll call.
Of course. Ms. Beckman?
Here.
Ms. Schaefer?
Here.
Mr. Salmon?
Here.
Mrs. White?
Here.
Mrs. McCune?
Here.
Mrs. Wooldridge?
Here.
Mrs. Korn?
Here.
Mrs. Richmond?
Here.
Mrs. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Markarian? Did we lose him?
I'm here.
Okay. Mr. Syatt?
Here.
Ms. Fox?
Here.
Madam President?
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. We very much welcome input from the public. Because this is a virtual meeting, public comment will be handled as follows. Beginning at 7 p.m., you can email btconnect@bernardsboe.com or text to 908-292-3047. Please use public comment as your email subject or the start of your text message. Indicate your first and last name and your address. This is required for your public comment to be included in the record. Please keep your comments to a maximum of approximately 3 minutes if they were to be read aloud. Individuals are permitted a maximum of 1 public comment during public comment on agenda items. Individuals are permitted a maximum of 1 public comment during public comment on non-agenda items. The board reserves the right to limit the length of time allotted for public comment on both agenda and non-agenda items. In the event that the time limitations prohibit the reading of a public comment received pursuant to these instructions, the comment will be published as part of the meeting minutes. No public comments will be accepted before 7 p.m. or after item 18, board forum on the agenda begins. At this time, I think we're going to go right to the, is it correct? We're going to go right to the board presentation. I'm not sure who's beginning that, so I'll just turn it over to whoever's starting.
Thank you, Madam President. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Welcome to our Board of Education meeting for August 24th, 2020. I hope that despite the challenging circumstances of the summer that you have been able to enjoy some time in the warm weather with family and friends, certainly to the extent possible. So with that said, I just want to let you know that this evening we are taking a team approach, as we often do when we have a varied and broad topic, such as our return to instruction plan that has many facets. So I'll be sharing a screen tonight and kind of emceeing the conversation, if you will, to update everyone on our return to instruction plans. So I'm going to do that now and just share my screen. Okay, I think we're at the right spot. Again, thank you for your patience as we work through our technology here. We are on our first slide for the return to instruction plan update for our Board of Education meeting tonight. The reason why we need to have an update to our plan is really threefold. We initially submitted our return to instruction plan document for review to the Executive County Superintendent actually a month ago today on July 24th, 2020. And since that time, ironically, all three of the documents listed here were received on August 13th. We received feedback on our initial draft plan from the county superintendent. And on that date, we also had two other documents provided to us. One was a new New Jersey Department of Health, guidance document for health departments and schools. And the third document was Executive Order 175. And each of these three pieces contributes to where we are headed for the opening of school this fall, and contributes to the amendments that we are making to our plan document. So first of all, what did the county superintendent have to say about our initial draft plan? What were the requirements for edits? Fortunately, relatively minor requirements for edits were identified. In the initial draft plan, we had some phasing language, meaning that we considered where we are right now to be sort of our most extreme situation, not having students in school. And we were referring to that as phase one. And then we had used some language about what we envisioned happening as we would go forward in time, hopefully getting guidance from the state and our local health department that would allow us to move into less restrictive phases. We were asked to either amend or not include that language and just stick to the current executive orders and the current environment when authoring this plan. And so that's what we did. We just took out those phased steps 2 and 3. We saved them, of course, because we're hoping that we can get back to that type of programming soon, where we can be less restrictive in all of our programs in terms of all the requirements that we're doing right now with respect to social distancing and masks and so on. So we look forward to being able to do that, but for now we were asked to just focus on where we are currently, and that's what we did. We made an amendment there. There were some other minor things. They wanted to have a list of the titles of the different folks that were on our building crisis response teams and pandemic response team members, so we added that to the plan. They wanted some clarifying language that would help explain what we were doing with professional development, the digital divide, meaning trying to make sure that students had both internet access and a device to work from, and also how students could transition between learning models. I'm sure everyone's familiar with the 100% virtual learning model and the blended learning model that we have been talking about for several weeks now. We had to make some updates because there were some changes to the requirements on masks, which we did. And they asked us to clarify in a couple places that visitors would also be required to wear masks when they were coming to the schools. And finally, we had to add some language specifying that the hand sanitizer that we were installing around the schools was an alcohol-based hand sanitizer. If I just could go up for one moment and highlight one thing that I meant to mention, which was that this title here at the top of this slide is a hyperlink to the full return to instruction plan document that I was just describing, that was submitted as a draft and now has been updated to submit as a final copy. So when we post this presentation, which if it's not already available online will be posted tomorrow, if you are interested in looking at the full plan document, it's roughly 100 pages. Of course, you're welcome to do that. And the link is provided here. I just wanted to make sure I highlighted that as I was explaining first what the county superintendent had asked us to make for amendments going from our initial draft to the final draft. When you look at that full document, if you're interested in doing so, you'll see some things highlighted in yellow That is because the county superintendent asked us to do that, to just show him what the changes were. We will clean that up and it'll have no highlights probably within the next few days. So the second aspect that has had some impact to our plan amendments for our return to instruction plan are related to the August 13th New Jersey Department of Health guidance documents that we received. And in particular, there were 3 areas that document kind of impacted our plan, and we needed to make some edits. Those 3 areas were the screening form for students and staff, how we would respond to a positive test result and close contacts, and also how contact tracing works and how we have to partner with the local Berners Township Health Department to work on contact tracing. Now, we're very fortunate in our district to have with us our supervisor of our nurses, our nursing coordinator, Rita Zarabera, is here with us this evening, and she's going to walk us through those forms so that you have a clear understanding of how that guidance document impacted our particular plan. So let me just switch to that plan document. And Ms. Zarabera, you can tell me that this is on the right page.
Page 60.
62, starting with the screening for the students.
If you go to 60, Mr. Markarian, it's screening for staff.
Okay,
We'll start there.
great, thanks.
Sure. So the Department of Education requires that we do daily screening for both staff and students. That screening is, the purpose of that is to assess for both symptoms and also exposure to someone who is COVID positive. So for our staff, we've created a Google form that they'll be filling out every day. That'll be done in the morning prior to them entering a building. And then one of our school nurses will be reviewing the answers 30 minutes prior to the school start time. So that's, you can see some of the questions that are here. Basically, we're asking them to name what building they're in, if they have any symptoms, and I'll explain a little bit more about that in a second. And also if they've been exposed to anyone who's tested positive for COVID, that's there. And also if they've been exposed via travel. So as most of you probably know, there are travel advisories that were put out by both the CDC for international travel, and then also New Jersey travel advisories, which includes states in the United States that the New Jersey governor has said are on the watch list and can't travel to. So that's the staff form. Students, the student form will be a form that's in Genesis. Parents are going to be asked to complete that form every morning, again, 30 minutes prior to the school start time. They will acknowledge that they're aware of the child sickness guidelines that our district has in place. And then we'll also ask about symptoms. I do want to clarify that the New Jersey Department of Health put out on August 13th, as Mr. Markarian mentioned, a new guidance document. And in that, they broke the symptoms down into 2 different categories. The first category, which you can see here under question number 5, is a number of symptoms that you can have. You can have up to 2 of those symptoms before we would say that you should probably consider that you might have COVID. So fever, chills, cough, rigors, muscle aches, headaches, sore throat, nausea or vomiting, diarrhea, fatigue, congestion or runny nose, and shortness of breath. So for that category, if you were to answer that your child has 2 or more of those symptoms, they should not come to school that day, and they need to, you need to be in touch with the school nurse. The second question related to symptoms asks if you have any one of the following symptoms: cough, shortness of breath, difficulty breathing, new loss of smell, or new loss of taste. So if your child has any one of those symptoms, they're not permitted to come to school, and you would contact the nurse. The other questions after that, again, relate to exposure. Exposure is defined as being within 6 feet of an infected person for at least 10 minutes. So we're asking, in the last 14 days, have you been in close contact with a person who has confirmed COVID-19? And again, if you answer yes, your child would stay home from school that day and you would contact the nurse. The next question again is asking about your household. Has anyone in your household been diagnosed with COVID-19? And again, if they have, in the last 14 days, you would keep your child home from school and contact the school nurse for guidance. And then the next question is related to travel. We've got links there for New Jersey Travel Advisory and also for the CDC Travel Advisory. And you need to state that you have not traveled to any of those places in the last 14 days. So that's the screening form for students. The next policy that I wanted to go over were the guidelines for symptomatic response for anyone who does test positive for COVID or has symptoms. Again, this was developed and revised numerous times over the last few months. Every time the CDC changed their guidance or the Department of Health in our state or locally changed, we had to edit and change this guidance. So essentially what it says is that each school needs to have an isolation room, which we have done. All of our buildings have identified an isolation room. So if a student in school has any symptoms, they would be triaged by the nurse and then be in the isolation room so they're isolated or kept away from anyone else. The nurse, each school nurse is considered the health director and will guide what happens in the building. And then what I'd like to review, I guess, is some of the things that I think a lot of people have questions about, and that is what happens if someone tests positive? What happens if someone's a close contact? So here, exactly where Mr. Markarian has the slide. If someone tests positive, before they can return to school, you need to be fever-free for 24 hours or 1 full day of no fever, and that's without using any fever-reducing medication. You also have to have an improvement in the symptoms that you're having, and you need to let 10 days pass since the symptoms first appeared. Now, the only other caveat with that is that if an alternative diagnosis is made. So if you have symptoms or your child has symptoms and you go to the doctor and the doctor decides that it's strep throat and they can write a note saying you have strep throat, then that would waive some of the other criteria here or the conditions for exclusion. And then lastly, you have to have a written clearance from a medical doctor saying you can return to school. If your child has been identified as a close contact of a COVID positive person, then the quarantine requirement is 14 days. 14 days, you need to be free of contagious disease, and also a doctor has to state that you are medically cleared to return to school. If someone is asymptomatic, and I think that, yeah, if a person is asymptomatic but tested positive. So that may occur if for some reason, maybe someone that you think was in contact with a child, you might go and get your child tested, but your child is asymptomatic. So if they're asymptomatic, but they are COVID positive, then again, it's 10 days of isolation after the test was done, as long as you have no other symptoms that develop. The next condition would be someone who's a household member of someone who tested positive for COVID. And in that case, the requirement is 14 days of quarantine after the 10 days of isolation for the person that was positive. So that is a long time, and it's 24 days, and that I've confirmed with our health department. So if someone in the household is tested positive with COVID, then they need to isolate for 10 days, but the other household members, so the other family members must quarantine for 14 days after that isolation period finished. And then the last thing I guess I wanted to talk about was travel. So if you've traveled to a state that's on the travel advisory for New Jersey, or if you've traveled internationally and it's the country that you've gone to is on the CDC travel advisory list, then you must quarantine for 14 days after the last day of travel or exposure. One of the things that we've had questions about are, what if I'm a close contact of a close contact? So in other words, what happens if a parent travels to another state and the state is on the travel advisory list, or they've traveled internationally, what happens to the student? Well, the student, there really is no requirement for you to quarantine. So if you're a close contact of a close contact, there are really no restrictions. So you can come to school. And the last thing I guess I wanted to point out about symptoms is that testing alone does not waive the other conditions that we've talked about. So going and having a test and finding out that you're testing negative does not void the requirement to quarantine or to see a physician and provide a note from a doctor saying that you're medically cleared to return to school. And then the last policy that we wanted to go over tonight was contact tracing. So contact tracing means that you're trying to identify people that have a communicable disease and also their contacts. So in school, the school nurses will help with contact tracing and will guide that. But contact tracing is done and is led by the local health department. So the Bernards Township Health Department will lead all contact tracing, and the school nurses will participate in that and assist them with getting the information they need to make contacts. All of the school nurses have done a Johns Hopkins contact tracing course, so they're very well familiar with what they need to do, and they will follow the direction of the Bernards Township Health Department. Our district, as we did last March, will follow the lead from the Bernards Township Health Department regarding exclusion for any students or staff members, regarding any suspension of activities, and also closing schools. So the local health officer will always be in touch with our superintendent, with the school nurses, to see what's happening locally, what's happening in the region of the state, and they'll make determinations with all of those facts as they gather all of those facts regarding who needs to be excluded from school or when we might have to shut down any building. And I think those are the only policies that we were going to talk about tonight, Mr. Markarian.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Airbearer. Appreciate that. Okay, so just following up on one piece that sometimes comes up with respect to that first bullet item, the screening form for students and staff. We recognize that there will be days that students do not report to the school building, depending on whether they're A day, B day, what have you. But any time that a student is reporting to school, they do need to complete that screening form. So for example, if a student athlete has a practice and maybe that's the only reason they're coming to school that day, they still have to complete this screening form. So I just wanted to kind of go back a couple slides and talk a little bit more about this guidance document for health departments and schools. In addition to having an impact on some of the actual forms that we are doing for our return to instruction plan document, I just wanted to share with you a little bit more of the contents of that document. This is the document itself. I've shared the link a couple times with parents over the course of the past couple weeks, and you may have taken a look at it. One of the interesting things about the document is that it talks about different risk categories, and that's designed to help the health department guide the school district in terms of what's going on in the local community, what types of risks are out there in our area. And our area is made up of 100 in Somerset counties. They actually divided the state up into multiple regions. If you had taken a look at this document at the beginning, it talks about these different regions that the state has been divided into, and each of those regions is being classified by its different risk levels. Again, they're calling it the regional risk matrix. And so that's designed to help our region, being Hunterdon, Mercer, and Somerset, along with the other 5 regions, have a reasonable sense of what's going on geographically. And there is a website, the New Jersey Department of Health is maintaining a website that is updated approximately 1 time per week. And that once a week update is designed to help each of these 6 regions be classified in those different categories of risk by those regions. I also wanted to highlight one other thing that is something that we as a school district have to really kind of have a close sense of that's also on this particular document. And that is related to something that Ms. Zarabera was talking about what happens when illness occurs within the school setting. We talked a lot about what happens in the event that there's a student who actually tests positive or a staff member that tests positive. But even in the case of students that are ill, we're being asked through this guidance document to take some steps, as we normally would, of course, if there was a student that was ill in school, because there may be a student that is potentially a case of COVID-19. So even in the event that someone is ill, a staff member or student is ill, but we don't know at a particular time or at the time that they show signs of illness that they're even in fact positive, we still have to do some things that are prescribed here in this guidance document. And depending on what happens, we may be in a situation working with our local health department, or the LHD as it's described in this document. We may be in a situation where we're required to close off certain areas of the building, and I think Ms. Zarabera was alluding to that in consultation with the local health department, we have to handle these situations on a case-by-case basis. And it may be that we're closing classrooms or an area of a building, and if that's necessary to do, we may not be able to use that area of the building for a day while we clean or disinfect. So different things can happen, and it can be kind of variable on a case-by-case basis as we work through the scenario or the details of each of the concerning illnesses that present themselves throughout the school system. Interestingly, this guidance document also attempts to provide some scenarios that I think it's very important to point out are just that. They're scenarios. They're not guaranteed if this happens, then exactly this is going to happen. I would focus on the bold language at the top of what I'm showing you here, that closure is a local decision that's made by the school administration in consultation with the local public health department. Obviously, we are going to follow the lead of the local public health departments. We're trusting our excellent staff in the town to help us with these decisions because we're talking about health decisions. And so we're going to be working closely with them and following their lead. And this gives you some scenarios about what might happen. But again, it's important to note that different things can happen in different scenarios that could lead to different conclusions. So I just wanted to share this document with the public. It has a lot of interesting information in it. And as I said, I shared this link a couple times, and I just wanted to show you why I thought it was so important, because it has some pretty direct impact on the kinds of things that could happen to schools operationally. And many parents have asked the question, well, what's going to happen when we have our first positive case in school? And so although it's difficult to pinpoint a response to that question, here are some things that give you an idea. Okay. That's what I was just describing, the regional risk matrix, the possible need to close classrooms based on an ill person, example scenarios, and keep in mind that each situation is unique. So this brings us to another section of our presentation tonight, which is related to the minimum requirements for opening schools for in-person instruction. Obviously, we have a plan document. We feel good about our plans in terms of what it is that we're required to do and making sure that our document says what it's supposed to say, because we're doing what we are supposed to be doing in order to prepare schools to be open for in-person instruction. However, it's just a plan. We still have to try to make everything happen. Can we get all these minimum requirements accomplished in time to feel like we are ready to open schools for in-person instruction? So here are the three areas where we are very challenged in order to make this happen. And I want to show them to you at this point, starting off with the first topic, that our Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources is going to tackle, and that is the staffing issues that we're grappling with. Mr. Syatt?
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. So the summer is always a busy time for us, regardless of it being a pandemic or not. And this year in particular has certainly been a challenge. And I just wanted to talk about a couple of issues we're facing as we near the start of school. The first issue isn't an area that we directly staff. As you know, we contract services with Aramark, and one of the services we contract for is our custodial services. And obviously, we're very concerned making sure that we have enough staffing from Aramark to ensure that areas are clean, and in some cases clean multiple times a day, surfaces, areas, classrooms, public spaces in general. And so we checked with them, and as of today, they're reporting that there's 6 custodians down. As of today, there's a couple in the pipeline. So we're really mindful of that, making sure that they're going to be able to staff appropriately. Obviously, we need custodians to be able to clean all of our public areas in our buildings, of course. The other area that I've mentioned the last time we talked about staffing, which is certainly a major recruitment issue for us, is our substitute workforce. We generally, on average, see about 180 to 200 subs that are working in our district. Oftentimes, they're shared with other districts in the area. And so we always feel pretty good if we're at about 180 to 200 subs in our district. So one of the things that was critical for us, especially this year, is to ensure that we still have a thriving substitute workforce, if you will, one that is strong, one that I feel good about entering this school year. In particular, if we do happen to have staff members who do fall ill, that we're able to staff those areas appropriately. Or as Rita mentioned, if we have staff who don't meet that screening protocol and now they are not able to come into school, we need to be able to staff those classrooms appropriately. So we did look at our subs recently. We sent them a survey, and right now I'm looking at about 62% of our workforce who are reporting that they'll return to work. So we're at about 110 substitutes. I can confirm at this time. That isn't a final list. Obviously, I'm still waiting on some to get back to us. But this is also a good time. It's always a good time for me to recruit for a moment here. And so I did put a link in this presentation tonight. You can see that substitute line, which is bolded and underlined there. We are always looking for substitutes. And the process to become a substitute in Berners Township is actually listed in that link. So we have many community members. We always value our community members working in our school. So if that is something that you're interested in, please, I will be in touch with you, or my office will be in touch with you if you click on that link and look at some of the basic procedures to follow for becoming a substitute. So again, substitutes certainly a concern, in particular at the secondary level. Of those 110, I've only got 49 reporting that they'll work at the secondary level. And of course, our 2 largest buildings are at the secondary level. So again, still want to see that substitute workforce increased. And so again, hoping to bring some more on board. And I still have some outstanding folks that haven't gotten back to us yet. So we'll hopefully get that number up a little bit. Vacant positions, always have vacant positions as we go into the start of the school year. That's not uncommon as we see staff move, whether it's resign, retire, sometimes later in the summer. So it's a little more challenging to staff. This summer, a little bit unique. We had a few more resignations and retirements later in the summer. And so that, combined with what I would consider to be a smaller pool of applicants, does have us at a number higher than I'd like to see with the vacant positions right now at this time. I've got between 8 and 10 vacant positions. I think I'll be down to 8 by the end of the day tomorrow, hopefully. And then the other thing that's certainly unique about this year is the number of federal leaves that we talked about a couple of board meetings ago. I talked about the what's referred to as the FFCRA, the Family First Corona Response Act, which is an act that is designed to cover really a few areas COVID related. But the one area in particular that staff members are taking advantage of is the hardship for childcare. So some staff members are unable to find childcare. They are allowed to use this federal leave, and they are using it. And so I don't have a final number now, but we certainly would anticipate that number growing. I'm at least 10 to 15 right now as we speak today. And then the last one, another federal law, is the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. This covers many groups of folks, of course, across the country. But as we're concerned, as far as staffing, it does cover staff and health conditions. And so we do have a number of staff members who have submitted medical documentation that must be reviewed by law. And I consult with our district physician on all of those medical documents. And then a determination is made about an acceptable accommodation. And in some cases, that accommodation could be telework. So that is a federal law, and obviously that's something not unique. That's law has always existed, but certainly this year we are seeing more instances as this unique challenge is facing us all. So that's a quick snapshot where we are right now, Mr. Markarian, our staffing.
Thank you, Mr. Sy. So a second key minimum requirement that we are working through is related to facilities. We're in pretty good shape installing the hygiene equipment that we have purchased and installing the touchless faucets. We've had to bring in some extra help, but we think we're going to be able to get that done probably in the next couple of weeks. Our biggest challenge is bringing on online, if you will, all of the mechanical equipment that largely for the summertime is not online because of the fact that we only have main offices that are typically being used in the summertime. So the equipment has been turned on at this point. Unfortunately, it can be a lengthy process in making sure that it is all operational. And one of the key requirements of our return to instruction plan is to make sure that mechanical equipment that is recirculating air is providing an outside air component in that mix. So we have to go through and make sure all the mechanical equipment is working and make any necessary repairs or adjustments to the equipment. Adjustments to the equipment could include the filters and upgrading filters where it's possible and appropriate. The other aspect of the mechanical equipment is again related to providing that outside air, and that BAS that you see there, the building automation system, is really the computer system that helps us to control and monitor the mechanical equipment that we have throughout our district. Not every single piece of equipment is connected to the building automation system, but the vast majority of it is. And so we may need to make some adjustments to that equipment as well in order to be in full compliance with our requirements to open our schools. So this could be a little bit more of a time-consuming process in order to take care of this. And for that reason, when we consider all of our staffing, our facilities, and also our critical supplies that we have not received all of yet, hopefully in the next couple weeks, again, we don't have guarantees on these delivery dates, but we have a very large order of barriers that are being used in classrooms, since we know that we cannot separate our students by 6 feet or more in all of our classrooms. We have a lot of desk barriers that we need to bring in and install in the classrooms. We've got an order of KN95 masks for our nurses that we're outstanding on. And we are waiting for a key piece of equipment in electrostatic sprayers, which are going to be used for disinfecting large areas. These are sometimes called atomizer sprayers. We need this equipment in order to be able to do the disinfecting. So taking into account our critical supply needs, the work that we need to verify on our mechanical equipment and any adjustments that we need to make there, and getting our staffing to where we think it needs to be, we don't think that we're going to be able to realistically do that in the next few weeks. Our goal then is to bring in our students for in-person instruction on October 1st. We believe that throughout the month of September, we'll be able to get into full compliance with what our plan calls for in meeting all those minimum requirements. That date, Thursday, October 1st, would be a B day, which is relevant for those students that are coming in the blended learning program, whether they be an A day or B day student. As a consequence, all students would start the school year with 100% virtual learning model. That means regardless of whether you chose the blended learning model or the virtual learning model, for the month of September, everyone would be working virtually from home. We do have a Board of Education meeting in about 2-3 weeks. September 14th is our next Board of Education meeting. And at that time, obviously, if there's any new information that needs to be considered, certainly we'll do that. As everyone has experienced over the course of the last 4 or 5 months, it seems as though information is constantly changing and we're having to respond to it. Perfect example are the August 13th documents that I described earlier in the presentation, listed here. And by the way, I did want to point out, for those of you that were trying to find where are those activity reports, that link is provided there as well. It goes along with that New Jersey Department of Health guidance document, where it talks about the risk levels for our region. And as I mentioned, they are updating that list approximately weekly. And so if you're interested in keeping an eye on what our current risk level is, you can refer to that link. That's where they are posting the updated activity reports. So going back down to our timing slide, again, as we learn of more information, certainly we'll have the opportunity to continue to update what our plans are. And if there's a need to do anything differently with our timing, we'll certainly communicate that. Obviously, we want to get back to school as soon as we possibly can. But realistically, looking at our plan and what the minimum requirements are, we want to give ourselves the best chance of being able to get open and stay open. And therefore, we need to take some extra time to take care of the staffing, the facilities, and the PPE to meet these minimum requirements in the most responsible way possible. Although not necessary with respect to the minimum requirements, we also are sensitive to building our capacity to be successful when we start running a school that is what can be labeled a hybrid school. It's a hybrid school because the goal that we're trying to get to is to run 2 instructional programs simultaneously. One piece of the hybrid program is the 100% virtual that everybody's going to be starting on in September. And the other piece of the hybrid program is the blended learning model, where students are learning sometimes in the school building and other times at home. In order to build that capacity and give us the best chance to succeed, obviously time is helpful. Although it's not mandatory by minimum requirements, we know that having a little extra time is going to be helpful in ultimately being successful. And I just wanted to share with you why I'm saying that. There are a few pieces that are related to that statement. The first and foremost that I believe is going to be most useful for us is that when we open the school year and we are 100% virtual with all the students, the teachers and the students will be focused in one environment all at the same time. So while we're developing process and procedures, teaching the kids how to use new online tools, teaching the students how to use their Google Calendar, teaching the students how to use their K2 platform, all of those things are going to be done with a singular focus by the teacher and the students together online at the same time. Keep in mind, it's very ambitious to run a blended learning program where the teacher in the classroom has their attention divided between those in front of them and those on a Zoom call. So by having some time in September to really develop the online skills, when they bring in the in-person environment, all the students at that time will have had an understanding of what the online environment is, and they will be adding something new after having spent some time in September learning the online environment, rather than trying to bring 2 new pieces together simultaneously. So I think that's going to serve us well in terms of building capacity to be successful. Obviously, that's leading into the second bullet point there, giving the staff and the students an opportunity to prepare for that blended learning environment by working together in the online environment first in September. The other thing that I think is going to go a long way is that when the students are at home and the teachers are working remotely, they can be with the students and not be wearing masks. So at least they can develop that relationship. They can communicate clearly. There isn't a mask over their mouths, and the staff members and the students can see each other's faces. I think that as you start out the school year, That's a nice thing, and you will be able to build a better relationship when you actually see the people that you're talking to. I think that's a nice way to start out. Obviously, having September gives us a little bit more time as well to train staff and to prepare buildings, even though not necessarily a minimum requirement. Having a little bit more time for staff to learn their craft without having their attention divided between two groups of students, I think is going to be very helpful. The building administrators will also have the opportunity to spend some time with the teachers in their classrooms so that the teacher becomes familiar with the teaching environment that they're going to have to get used to. A lot of changes have happened in the school building. Teachers are going to be walking into classrooms that they're not familiar with, setups that have been changed, technology that's being rearranged, and still adjustments being made to their environment. Their workspace is not what it was when they left the buildings last March. So for staff to have some time to get in there, not only during the in-service days at the beginning of September, but throughout the month of September, to practice teaching, I think they're going to all be well served by that. I think the principals are going to appreciate having that time to work with them and hopefully give us the best chance to succeed when we start bringing students in person and working what is not going to be a simple process of doing a hybrid program where teachers are teaching to students that are in front of them and to students that are remote. At this time, we're going to transition a little bit to try to clarify for everyone what schedules are going to look like for the month of September. Remember that students, regardless of their selection for the month of September, which is 17 days of school, starting with that first day on Thursday, September 3rd, are going to be remote. So the first day of school that counts towards our 180 days is going to be September 3rd. Please don't walk away from this presentation with your children thinking that school doesn't start until October 1st. School starts on Thursday, September 3rd. That is going to be our first day of instruction with the students. It's just that for those first 17 days in September, the students are all going to be working from home. With that, our Assistant Superintendent for Curriculum Instruction, Ms. Fox, is going to describe for you a little bit the schedules that we're going into September with.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. So in light of this shift to all virtual instruction, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about the adjustments that we'll be making to the learning plan, the hybrid learning plan that we described to you back in July. Just in review, just to remind you, back in May, we began working with the Return to Instruction Task Force, which was comprised of a number of teachers volunteering their time, administrators, other staff members, meeting to think about how we could transition our learning plan in the fall, depending on how that return would end up looking. Because back in May, we really had no idea what we would be facing in September. So we began that process by revising the 100% virtual instructional plan, thinking that, we had learned a lot in the spring and we could start by revising that. And then as we learned more about the return, what we did was shifted our focus on developing a blended learning plan, which combined the 100% virtual learning plan with a blended learning plan. So that has taken place over the months of May, June, July, and August. And we continued to meet with the teachers and the administrators, revising that plan all the time. One of the main components of that blended learning plan that I just wanted to point out was, of course, the A and B cohorts that we were implementing and working to implement to attain social distancing. A few things I wanted to highlight here about the learning plans we developed over the spring and the summer were some changes we were looking to make based on our experience in the spring. And they include at the K-5 level, implementation of daily class meetings that would be live, daily class meetings, maintaining our focus on small group instruction and really working with the teachers in their ability to schedule it so that students were receiving the instruction that they needed, increasing the special area instruction, and including science and social studies instruction, which was something we did not do in the spring. Grades 6 through 12, we worked on that AB cohort rotation based on a bell schedule where the students would come to school for periods 1 through 4 and an advisory period on 2 days a week, Monday and Thursday, sorry, and the advisory period as well on those days, which is something that we will still be developing and sharing information with students about, but is intended really for in-person instruction. But the periods 1 through 4 and the advisory period occur on 2 days a week, and then periods 5 through 9, where students would be in school 2 days a week for Tuesday and Friday. And then all classes would come together virtually to meet on Wednesdays, bringing both cohorts together for a full schedule of classes. Another big change would be implementing the attendance taken during every live meeting on a bell schedule. So as we move through the summer, we asked parents to select which model they wanted their child to be enrolled in. The 100% virtual model, if they weren't ready to send their children back to school, or the blended learning model that I just described pieces of. And currently, as the months have unfolded, parents have been, they submitted their initial request through Genesis on August 3rd, and we were at about 20% of parents asking for virtual learning. And over the course of the last couple of weeks, it has increased to 35%. And so parents are continuing to change and request changes to the virtual model. Can you change the slide, Mr. Markarian? Thank you. So one of the things I wanted to point out to you is that as we transition to a virtual model for the month of September, we are doing so in a way that maintains what we put together for the hybrid learning model. And we're doing that because it will provide a smoother transition back to hybrid when we come back to school on October 1st. So we're not making any drastic changes to that model so that that transition will be smoother. And within that plan, we were providing a structured schedule, which includes daily and class attendance. We're providing a weekly learning plan or agenda, which is posted to the homework portal as well as in Seesaw or Google Classroom. So that lays out the plan for the week for the students and for the parents to assist those students. We'll be utilizing Google Calendar for all of the Zoom meetings so that it'll help organize and know where you have to be and when you have to be there in one place. We're instituting this common communication platform at all grades. So K through 2 students will be using Seesaw, and the students in grades 3 through 12 will all be using Google Classroom. So that'll be a consistent communication platform. And in both sort of models, hybrid learning and this virtual instructional plan, we have a focus on continuing our district collaboration for our curriculum planning so that we are consistently implementing and working on focusing on what's best for students district-wide. Next slide. So at the K-5 level, I wanted to talk a little bit about what instruction will look like and a few of the changes based on our switch to virtual instruction for the month of September. So first of all, there are no longer cohort groups until we return to in-person instruction. We won't be implementing those cohort groups. Each morning, like I said, we'll begin with a live class meeting. Instruction will be focused on academic blocks in reading, writing, and mathematics, and I'll explain that a little bit more in terms of the time allotments on the next slide. But within those blocks, the students will be engaged in really these 3 activities or focuses of instruction. So there's direct instruction, guided practice, and independent application. Direct instruction is whole class instruction, and that can be either a live or pre-recorded mini lesson, or a live or pre-recorded read aloud. That's the direct instruction piece. And then the students will participate in some small group instruction. All students will have some small group instruction on a daily basis in either reading, mathematics, or writing. That can take the form of guided reading groups, pre-recorded videos from in or outside of the district, and as well as interactive reinforcement activities from some of the many resources that we are providing. And then finally, students will work either independently or with a partner. And that can look like the submission of some work to Google Classroom or Seesaw through math practice problems, or completing a graphic organizer, or writing to a writing prompt and submitting it to the teacher through that platform. On the scheduled rotation, the students will attend a Zoom check-in with their classroom teacher. And the purpose of that will be to supplement and reinforce any area of need in reading, writing, or mathematics. They will have daily special area instruction, and those are the specials: art, music, PE, and tech and media. And then science and social studies instruction will be included asynchronously for students to complete in the afternoon, and they'll also be integrated into the English language arts curriculum wherever appropriate. So this slide shows you the time allotment breakdown for each of those instructional blocks, right? So the reading, writing, and mathematic blocks that I described as having direct instruction, guided practice, and independent application are 45 minutes in length approximately. The class meetings, the special area instruction, and the science and social studies instruction are approximately 30 minutes. And the Zoom afternoon check-in twice a week would be for 30 minutes as well. Next slide. Just as an example, this is what a third grade schedule could look like. And it's one example because the specials are placed at a different time of day in every grade level. So in the third grade, you'll see that the special happens between 10:30 and 11. And then the instruction is built around that. So the class meeting starts at 8:45 for a half an hour. Then there's a 15-minute break before the reading block. Then there's a break before the special. And then after the special, there's a break before the writing block begins at 11:15. We give them another break before the math block. Then there's a lunch time period from 1 to 2 o'clock. And then in that fifth block at the end of the day is where the students would have their science and social studies instruction or quest, followed by the Zoom check-in where they could meet in a small group or individually with their classroom teacher. So at the 6-12 level, very little will change in terms of the virtual instruction in the way it's organized from the teacher's point of view. We will obviously not be using the cohorts until we return to the in-person instruction. So all of the students will attend all of the scheduled classes and attendance will be taken. This provides, we think, a clear and consistent daily schedule for students, and it is the same schedule they will transition back to when we come back to school in October on the hybrid model. They will have 3 class meetings per week in each course. We are instituting these instructional models that meet the needs of different disciplines and grade levels. And then the common expectations that I've laid out previously that include the weekly agendas. So students have at the beginning of the week, the expectations for the week, as well as all of the Zoom invites for meetings shared on Google Calendar. All students using Google Classroom, attendance by period, and virtual tutorial. So those are all elements of instruction at the 6-12 level, really in the hybrid blended learning model, as well as in this virtual instruction model. We will continue to have all classes meet in reduced class periods on Wednesdays. So all 9 periods will meet on Wednesdays, just as we had explained in July with our hybrid model. So the next couple of slides just show you the schedule revisions that necessitates at WAMS and at Ridge. Not many. The main difference is that you'll see there are no longer the cohorts represented on the Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday blocks. So all of the students would be participating in class on Monday, periods 1, 2, 3, and 4, and again on Thursday. And all of the students would be participating in class together virtually on Tuesday for periods 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9, and again on Friday. The only other change reflected here is that we don't have to build in travel time for the students leaving school and going home. So there's just a longer block of time for the virtual tutorial at the end of the day. Next slide shows the slight difference in the Ridge schedule, which is really just a different start and end time, but everything else is really the same on this on the schedule at Ridge. So that really concludes any of the modifications we're making to go to this virtual model for the month of September. I think next up is going to be Jean O'Connell speaking about the special area program, special services programs.
Highlight and thank Ms. Fox, as well as many of our Board of Education members and members of the community who actually tried a test run, if you will, of some of our scheduling plans for Ridge High School. And as I was discussing earlier, this idea of capacity building, and one of the things that came up when we ran that trial process was obviously, how did it go and what were some of the hiccups and challenges that we had when we ran this sample schedule at the high school, which is very similar to the schedule that we have planned for William Annan also. So as we take advantage of September, it gives us a little bit more time to build capacity in the areas where we saw some challenges, right? Whether it was the way that a laptop is able to work to capture Zoom, which way to position the teacher's laptop, how to best plug things in, simple things like proximity to outlets and the length of an HDMI cable. You know, simple things that until you actually start doing things, you don't necessarily discover all of them. So I do want to thank both Ms. Fox. I know that our new principal, Dr. Lazovic, many of our supervisors were really great in running classes. They actually taught little mini lessons. And again, thanks to our board members and community members that participated as students. It was really a great experience. I think it helped us learn a lot. I don't know if there's anything else you want to share about it, Ms. Fox, but if you want to, you could jump in before Ms. O'Connell takes over.
I think you covered it. We learned a lot about what kind of practice teachers will benefit from and the sort of struggles they'll have in managing two learning environments that I do think speaks to what you talked about in terms of capacity building, kind of giving teachers the opportunity to get used to working in both environments and manage those transitions between classes is something that they'll benefit from significantly, because that was certainly an enormous challenge.
Right. Well, thanks again for everybody that helped make that possible. I think it was really fruitful for us. Ms. O'Connell?
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. Well, in special education, we have a few different programs. First, skip ahead here. So I'd like to talk to you about each one of those programs. First, we have our K-5 level, which will include our in-class support, resource room, our LLD programs, and our behavioral disability programs. In those classrooms, we'll have instructional methods and time allotments that are very similar to what Ms. Fox just reported. Locations of those class, the special education students will have meetings with the general education as far as specials are concerned and their morning meetings, but they will have their reading, writing, and math with a special education teacher. Additional elements of that program may include an increase of teacher and aide support, breaking the subject area blocks into further manageable units of time, and also skill in time management, planning, and prioritizing, organizing, and self-managing and self-monitoring. We noticed last time when the students were out that they really needed a bit more work with this. Next slide. In our self-contained classes, which really include our CBAP program, that will be all the way from preschool to age 12, grades 6 through 12, our LLD programs, our functional life skills programs, and our vocational skill programs. We will follow the virtual elementary, William Annan, and Bridge models. Students will also have speech, occupational, and physical therapy. They will be scheduled as per the child's IEP. Adapted PE will also be scheduled because that is part of the student's IEP. Instruction will consist of direct instruction, guided practice, independent practice for targeted skills in the areas of academics, social, language, pre-vocational, and independent skills. Then an additional element that we'd like to add to the programs is in the afternoon blocks. That will consist of parent training for self-management, independent living, and or leisure skills with either teachers or instructional aides will be giving that instruction. Next slide. In our special education classes 6-12, which include our in-class support, in-class replacement, resource room, and behavioral disability programs, instructional methods and times are going to also be similar to general education daily schedules. Students are expected to check in with teachers every period. Teachers will be meeting with students frequently to provide support, instruction, modification during those class periods, and also in the afternoon if that's needed. During the first weeks of school, special education teachers will meet with students to review expectations and suggestions on how to be successful in small groups. This will allow students to connect with the teacher and to ask questions. Many skills will be taught for students to be successful in a virtual learning environment, such as time management, organization, understanding the schedule, using online platforms, study skills, and self-advocacy. Next. Oh, sorry. Didn't have our PALS program, which should have been up. The only other program I might just mention, we might have just slipped that slide, is our PALS preschool program. There we go. The instructional method in that program we'll have 2 sessions of the PAL preschool program, and that will run each day, Monday through Thursday, under the virtual model. Students are either going to be assigned to one or the first or second session. On Fridays, what we're going to do a little bit differently this year, as we didn't do prior, is students will participate in small group virtual sessions to provide and carry over closure to some of the activities that were addressed during the week. Each session during the virtual classes will consist of a morning circle, small group instruction, and that will target gross motor, fine motor, language, social and pre-reading skills. These students also will have speech, occupational therapy, and physical therapy in accordance with their IEPs. Additional elements that possibly could be added to the program is daily enrichment to help parents as they work with their students at home and to connect to the enrichment development of both language and social skills. Thanks, Nick.
Thank you, Ms. O'Connell. Okay, so we kind of hit you with a lot in the last hour. I just wanted to kind of close by thanking people for their attention and their patience. I know that everybody wants to get back to school. Nobody wants to do it more than I do and the administration and the staff of our district. However, in light of what we are looking at in our plan for these minimum criteria, we really feel like September is an important time to make sure we have all those bases covered. And as I've tried to highlight multiple times over the last few months, we're dealing with a situation where expecting the unexpected is the norm. Having announcements, memos, executive orders, Department of Health, Department of Education, guidance documents being issued with changes, edits, and alterations have become the norm, and we're having to pivot regularly. And I just want to, ask you for your patience because it's really frustrating. It's frustrating for parents. It's frustrating for teachers. It's frustrating for administrators. There can be disappointment for our students, and that's not something that any of us want, but it's what we're living with right now. And that's not about people. That's not about the teachers. That's not about the kids. It's not about the Board of Ed. It's not about the administration. It's about a pandemic. And I just ask you to keep that in mind when you're probably doing what I do, which is try to manage frustration and try to manage disappointment. And if you're like me, sometimes that can, just make you want to go running until you can't run anymore or something to get it out of your system. But I would just ask you to keep it in mind that this is a problem that's a pandemic more than a people problem. So we need to keep that in mind, and we need to show grace before we lay blame, because the blame lies in a pandemic. And that's what we're all grappling with. So I ask you to be patient and to keep that in mind. And we will continue to do our best work with what we think is in the best interest for our students when making recommendations to the board. So thank you for listening. Okay, so from an agenda perspective, we are up to, just have to grab that.
Public comment on items?
Yeah, so typically, I'm sorry, Madam President, in the event that there's any Board of Ed member questions that you would like the administrative team to answer first, of course, we will do the public comment as well. But if any of the board members wanted to chime in now or after public comment, whatever is your pleasure is fine with us.
Board members, Mrs. White.
Just want to clarify one thing because I think it might be confusing. Because it is different than the previous memo that went back when it talked about those virtual days at the beginning. So the first day of school for everyone is September 3rd. And everybody, this is where you're confusing. Everybody's going to go to school. It's not, you're not doing your A day, your B days for these 17 days. You're going every day that there's school, correct?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to, because I think that that was where we were going to get questions from the public, because you're like, well, I got my cohort, so for the next, 17 days of school, you're going every day.
You attend virtually every day in both models. I mean, you attend every day in both models. In this model, you attend virtually every day.
Mrs. Korn.
I want to, even though we're not starting live, there's still sports. I think that would be a question, if the kids will still be practicing and going up to the school for their sports.
Sure. So the NJSIAA, pursuant to all of the guidance that we've received, is governing school sports, high school level sports. So whatever their programs are being determined by that organization, and the roadback document, as well as our plan that we are submitting, states that the NJSIAA will govern decisions about high school sports. So I believe I shared last week in one of my SOS Express messages kind of their latest and greatest announcement, which I believe was on August 19th, if I'm not mistaken. They put out a memo kind of describing the fact that, they're sticking with their program with respect to outdoor sports for the fall season, and expecting to start competitions in late September, early October. As far as we're concerned, that's great. We're glad for the kids that they can do it. However, when it comes to reporting to school for any kind of practices in September, they will still have to do their screening forms in order to be able to come to school and participate in the athletics. Ms. Beck?
Mrs. Beckman.
With regards to the forms, so if you're doing virtual up until October 1, they don't have to fill out those forms if they're not coming to school for sports or anything. Is that correct? Or should they fill out those forms anyway every day?
Ms. Sarah Barra, did you want to weigh in on that?
Yeah, so the purpose of the form is really related to having the students come in and the staff coming in and being together. So I would say for students, if they're not coming into the building or they're not coming to the school for any school activity, then there's no need to do the screening form. But if they're coming over for any athletic practice, then as Mr. Markarian said, they would need to do that every day.
Thank you.
Mr. Salmon.
Thanks. Nick, can you put up the slide again with the third graders schedule? So I can ask a few questions about that, and then I have a question about the WAMS/RID schedule. But just for kind of while you're doing that, I did participate in the simulated run through and asked questions about how come the teacher put the computer over there. It was hard to see their face. And they said, well, there's an HDMI cable that has to run from the computer to the projector, and the projector was installed so that you need like the 25-foot HDMI cable, and little things like that were, just about basic level instruction. Because I know everybody was, excited to get the kids back in school, and it's a real bummer that we have to postpone it. But those little things were just the things that popped up in the simulated instructional periods, not to mention any of the other stuff about moving the kids around the classes at the hallways at Ridge and WAMS, or even, going to the bathroom or something like that, or nurse's office at the elementary schools. So, logistically, I think putting it off a month, while it is, tough to deal with again, and like another kind of postponement, I think it's the right thing to do. And for that reason, for all the reasons that were outlined, I think it's, right. But okay, so Kristen, in this model, the teacher is taking attendance at 8:45 with the whole class, right?
Correct.
Okay, then at 9:30, is the teacher coming back in and taking live attendance for reading, or once attendance is at 8:45, that's it for the day?
And in the K-5 level, teachers take daily attendance at the beginning of the day only.
Got
The
it. Okay.
class attendance is 612.
Yeah, okay. So then at 9:30, the student has reading, and the reading is either, I guess, small group or individual, right?
Most
So,
likely it would start together with a mini lesson. So everybody's together, and then they would break off, and it could be pre-recorded where the teacher asks the students to watch the video before the live meeting, or it could be that the teacher gives a live mini lesson to the whole class. So that would be like the first step of the lesson, either live or pre-recorded.
yeah, so my question is, like, one of the biggest, obviously, feedback items from the spring was live
Mhm.
instruction, and live,
Right.
in particular, at the elementary level, live small group / individual
Right.
instruction. So where is that in this student's example schedule?
It'll really be throughout it, right? They're going to work to have, the students will have a small group instruction at a minimum of once a day, right? And then they will have a combination of that mini lesson being live or recorded, and that guided, the small group instruction, a combination of it being live and recorded. We're really looking to do a couple of things. There needs to be more live instruction, we agree, but there also needs to be a balance between how much screen time there is for the, especially the younger students.
Yeah.
And then for the teachers to work in small groups with students, it requires them to be, like, if they're in the classroom, they're moving around to the small groups while the kids are working independently, and then they go visit the small groups. So we're sort of recreating that virtually by having the way the teacher organizes the reading lesson into these 3 phases, if that makes sense. So that there will be times when one or the other part is recorded, but we're working for there to be opportunities by building the schedule for components of each one of them to include live instruction.
Live.
So it may not, yes, live interaction, live instruction in either the
No, right,
small
so-
or the large group setting.
Right. So I think that's what the concern was that I was
Right.
hearing, and that I experienced
Right.
personally, was the live full class meetings at the elementary level were a little, they were unmanageable. I mean,
Chaotic.
the little kids,
Chaotic.
are just screaming into the camera, and they don't know that they're on mute. So it's unmanageable. I think when you,
Right.
so I think at this level, in particular for the youngest kids, the K through 3, maybe even 4, but like, those kids need these small group, maybe even
Right.
individual. So I understand, like, if this student, let's say grade 3, and we're talking about grade 3, right? So this student has 9:30 to 10:15. They're going to, on Monday have their small group reading, and then Wednesday they would have small group reading, and then Friday they would have small group reading, all live instruction with the teacher. And then on the other days they would have some pre-recorded lesson or some guided learning activity.
Yeah,
that
some
right?
combination like that. Yeah, I don't know about the number, like Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Right,
That's what they
yeah,
have to,
right, this is
right?
hypothetical.
But some
Yeah.
number of a combination of live and pre-recorded.
And
But
then what is
we agree. Go
okay.
ahead.
Yeah, right. We've talked about this. I know. I'm just
Right.
kind of saying it out loud. So
Yeah.
the 240 to 315 section, what is, it says small group instruction, Zoom check-in. So in the spring, there was this concept of the office hours period. And it was essentially like, if you have a problem or an issue with something that we went over today or this week, you can Zoom into this. And the teacher was, available on Zoom. And what we heard when the feedback was that not a lot of kids were utilizing this. So now we're,
Right.
sort of putting this thing at the end of the day. So is this going to be more of like an ad hoc one-to-one where the teacher is scheduling like essentially individual or 1 or 2 kids during these Zooms, or is it going to be that same office hours concept?
It's really not exactly the office hours concept. It's more in line with targeting areas of need, right? So where it might be a small group, it might be an individual, but we're looking at it to be more that the teacher is scheduling time with the students who
Okay,
are in
great.
most need of that reinforcement.
Great. Yeah, I think the pre-scheduled is a good use of that block. Okay, and then
Correct.
on the, you don't have to go to this slide, but just on the WAMS/Ridge sample schedule. So on those blocks, like Monday, for example, the student starts at 7:35. So the teacher's taking attendance at 7:35 for that class, right? Is
Correct.
that, is then, and then again, the teacher for period 2 is taking live attendance. So for periods 1, 2, 3, and 4 on Monday, are those all live instruction sections, or are they some mix of live
Well,
instruction
they
videos?
are, well, similar to the way we explained the hybrid learning model, the teachers will take attendance at the beginning of the period, so all students are expected to come, and then the teachers will determine how to use that 50-minute block of time. So there will be times that the students stay for the whole 50-minute block, and there will be other times when, sort of like what we described in K-5, where they are asked to go do independent work or work in small groups, and potentially come back at the end of the period, or potentially not, again, until they have that class again. So there will be a variety, and that's where we talked about like the instructional models being developed, to line up with the needs of the discipline or the grade level. And it does also allow for, variety in that day that you just described. Instead of 4 50-minute blocks in a row, there may be a break between classes because the teacher kept them for 30 of the 50 minutes. Does that make sense?
Right. Yeah, it does. That's what I was asking. So, all right,
Right.
great. All right. That's it for me. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other board members? I'm sorry, I can't see if you're raising your hands. No other board member questions? Okay, before we go to public comment, I just quickly would like to take a moment to say thank you on behalf of the Board of Education to all the members of the community, staff members who wrote to the Board of Education over the past week or so. We took the time to read your emails, and we appreciate what a complicated and difficult situation this is for so many, but we truly appreciate you reaching out and sharing your thoughts and concerns in all aspects of this. And with that, Ms. Fox, if you are ready.
Sure. Ready?
Just a quick question. I think we were going to follow the same format as last time in terms of the length of public comment, and we will cap that at 45 minutes. And then with non-agenda item public comment, if there's an overflow, we can address it at that time.
Okay.
Everybody okay with that?
Ready? Okay, so the first question is from Julia Gogi, 76 Liberty Corner Road, LCS parent. There has already been a COVID-19 case among the student population. At what point will you submit plans to the state to change to remote instruction? Keeping schools closed for a mere 2 to 3 half days is what's precluding parents from applying for FMLA. It is more difficult to scramble and find care than simply closing the schools. Next, Elizabeth Vinhall, 22 Elizabeth Street. The medical form that is required on Genesis in order for a family to gain access is a violation of HIPAA, and therefore parents need to know how to bypass it so they can still have access without providing privileged medical information. Next is Max Albee, 96 Alder Lane. Board of Ed members, I am Max Albee, a rising senior, writing to express my thoughts of the reopening of schools. This pandemic has had us all locked up in our houses for months, and for some that has not been beneficial to our health. The first time I felt like a normal student again was when we were allowed to start football practice a few weeks ago. We recently had a student athlete test positive, which halted our practice for the time being. This announcement sucked to hear, but it was inevitable and something we will have to work through in the school as well. However, I'm still writing to tell you many of us students strongly want and need the hybrid schedule that has been proposed, not only to improve our mental health and well-being, but also to get the proper education we need that can't be provided 100% virtually. Multiple nationally recognized institutions have come out in support of reopening schools as long as it's in a safe and controlled environment, which we can offer. The following doctors' organizations have supported the reopening of schools: the Centers for Disease Control, the American Academy of Pediatrics, Dr. Anthony Fauci, and numerous other well-known scientists. To conclude, if your decision really does come down to the data, then the school should be reopened in some capacity in the fall with the proper PPE to protect students, staff, and the faculty. Pat Robertson, 56 Baldwin Court. Good evening. 1, how do you plan to transport sports teams with the COVID restrictions? And 2, how does the current diagnosis of COVID affect your opening? Thank you. Alyssa Larner, 135 Spencer Road. If a child in the hybrid model is required to quarantine because, for example, she has come in close contact with someone who has tested positive for COVID, or her family member has come in close contact with someone who has tested positive, how will she be able to attend school during this mandatory quarantine period? Assuming a 14-day quarantine period, that child could potentially miss 4 to 6 days of in-person schooling, even though she is not sick. Will she be charged absences for the days she misses her in-person classes due to quarantine? Alternatively, while in quarantine, will she be permitted to switch to the virtual model? These types of quarantines are likely to occur during the school year. The district should provide the child with opportunities to attend school virtually during the quarantine. We should encourage parents to do the right thing and quarantine their child if there is a suspected or potential exposure. Assuming the child is asymptomatic, forcing that child to accrue absences or otherwise miss school in this situation would not send the right message and could cause parents to send their children to school against the advice of health professionals, thereby putting the entire school population at risk. Andrea Lardiere, 119 Dykeman Place. Thank you for all of your hard work to keep our children safe as we return to school. My daughter is a rising freshman who was looking forward to be able to, quote, walk her schedule as she was able to do before each year at WAMS. I understand that not all freshmen can attend a walkthrough at once. However, I do not understand why a staggered approach, perhaps a cohort or by time period, cannot be utilized to allow the students to see where their classrooms are as opposed to wandering the halls aimlessly. In his recent video, Dr. Lazovic stated that a video walkthrough would be shown to the students at the virtual orientation, but obviously seeing it on video is a totally different experience than physically walking in the building. Please reconsider allowing the freshmen to enter the school for a brief time to at least see where their classes are to allow for a successful and stress-free beginning to the school year. Thank you for your time. So this is from Susan Roos, 57 Old Coach Road. Dear Bernards Township BOE. First, I would like to thank you for your service. I'm sure when you decided to run for the board, you had no idea that you would be facing such a situation as this, and it has turned into way more than you had planned. I cannot imagine the stress that you are all feeling. I'm writing to implore you to send the children back to school under the current A-B plan rather than moving to all virtual. Please read the attached article. It is exactly how many residents are feeling, just articulated in a much better way. We have done our jobs. We flattened the curve. Please also see the graph in the attached website. It is very telling how low cases and deaths are in Somerset County. We have been at a very low level for a long time. This is the lowest it can be. The virus is not going to disappear anytime soon. It won't be better in October or after marking period 1 or even in January. So we need to move forward now in the safest way possible rather than delay and cause more stress on our children and households. People have been panicked and concerned about many openings, and none have resulted in huge spikes, except for large parties and gatherings, which are quite frankly more likely to happen if these kids aren't in school. When the beaches opened in May, the Facebook pages were covered with people are not wearing masks on the beach or boardwalk. The virus is going to spike here in 2 weeks. Guess what? It didn't happen, and it's been 3 months. Yes, I realize that inside and outside are different, but there were really no increases because of those openings. So my point is that the fear was way worse than the reality. Daycares opened inside, really small children. Again, people were freaking out, and again, no spikes. I was just in Colorado, and yes, I flew. I ate dinner inside. Admittedly, that was weird, but I realized that with masks and social distancing, the risk is low. As it mentions in the article, we have to balance the risk of going back to school with the risk of the ramifications of not going back. Mental illness, the economy, stress, etc. Based on my research and reading, it would seem that the risk of not going back is greater at this point than that of going back. 20% of students are opting to stay home virtually. With the AB model, that means that the number of students in the school will be 40% of what it usually is. How can we not make this work? Mendham, Westmore Central area is going back with lunch. They are not that much smaller than we are. We need to make this work. I am happy to put you in touch with the Be our resident that works in that school district. I don't want to make this about me, but here's my example. My youngest daughter is a rising senior. She lost her junior prom, national Irish dance championships, all Scotland's competition, Harry Styles concert, didn't see her friends the entire quarantine. She learned to sew and has made about 100 masks. She hasn't hugged her grandma since March and is going to have to start her senior year with only half her friends. She has done her part, yet she has been optimistic and a trooper. When I told her that it looks like school opening is at risk, she almost crumbled. She has 4 AP classes that if they don't start on time will be tough to catch up. Sorry, virtual is not the same. She has college applications that I know they discuss in school, meetings that are supposed to happen with counselors. There is so much
Excuse
stress.
me, that was the 3 minutes. I don't know if it's real close to the end or just. But that
Another
was
paragraph. I think that's the gist of it. There's another closing paragraph, but I can move on. Eliana Marcus, 16 Lafayette Lane, Basking Ridge. Since there will be less seniors needing a parking spot in the Ridge parking lot, is there a way for juniors who have their license get a parking spot for school? Stephen Goji, 76 Liberty Corner Road. Are the facilities equipped with the MERV 17 filters that are required to efficiently condition the air? Scotch Plains Fanwood has just changed their plans to fully remote because this important piece of preparation was missing. Thank you, Steve. Sunil Malhotra, 23 Talmadge. Applaud you for the difficult decision to start in person later and kicking off year 100% virtual. Jonathan Collins, 43 Winding Lane. Can someone tell me why workers at all sorts of business, supermarkets, food stores, retail outlets can work and deal with hundreds, if not thousands of people a day, but the teachers in our district cannot? Another thing, how is that you have had 5 months to figure this out, but now we find that in-person learning will not take place until October? My wife is a nurse and I am a police officer. We don't have the option to work from home. This situation is unacceptable. Zulika Atif, 89 Haas Road. Can we have more frequent Zoom check-in with teachers? Hold on. Elaine D'Addario, getting her address. 46 Dykeman Place. Rita spoke on staff and student daily questionnaires, but did not mention underlying conditions, which was a yes or no questionnaire, the form for the in-school trial I attended. If you said yes to any of the questions, you are not allowed to go to the school building. I understand asking those who are comfortable signing a waiver to cover the district from legal action, but how do you legally square asking for federally protected information for which an individual cannot control and against their rights to health, medical privacy laws to enter a public taxpayer-funded building? This is unfairly discriminatory to those with underlying conditions. This was not mentioned tonight. Has it been removed? I have emailed about it before, but have yet to get an answer, so I ask again here. Thank you for help in understanding this important topic for staff, students, adults, and vendors of the school who may need to enter school buildings. Stacy Letty, 67 Spencer Road. With the kids now being home yet another month, they will be even further isolated from their peers. Will you allow the sports and music programs to meet, subject to appropriate guidelines? These kids need to be active, and remote school is not going to suffice. It's so important to their emotional and physical health. Please, can you address to the public how we keep the kids active beyond the few hours of the day they are in remote learning? Sherry Nelson, 195 Smoke Rise Road. Can you explain why 6 through 12 is a 9-period day? If the instruction is a half day with no lunch, shouldn't the schedule be for 8 periods split between the 2 days, so 4 periods each day? A 9-period school day includes lunch and study hall, so this schedule without lunch, it should be 8. Dan Solomon, 27 East Ash Street. Will 100% virtual students at WAMS and Ridge watch the in-person classes via Zoom that occur through the blended model or have separate instruction? In other words, will there be a difference, if any, between the learning approach of the virtual versus the blended students? Bindu Balan, 94 Constitution Way. Good evening. When parents were asked to pick between the two learning options by August 3rd, September 3rd was the school start for in-person hybrid. Parents picked virtual since September was too soon to have in-person instruction. Now with hybrid moving to October, will parents be given the option to switch to hybrid learning? Lester Lobo, 8 Hahnemann Road. With regard to school closure rules in the event of positive COVID cases, why are the rules solely based on positive cases recorded in schools as opposed to alternatively also monitoring a threshold, percent-based, on confirmed COVID cases in Somerset County general population as a whole? Kathleen Healy, 284 South Maple Avenue. I'm extremely disappointed to hear of this decision, especially with 10 days left until school starts. This creates a significant burden on working parents at the expense of our children. As you noted, 65% of parents were choosing to send their children back, and many will now spend thousands of dollars to keep their kids educated and supervised in this time to make sure they get off to a good start. It has been increasingly clear that changes would be needed, including teacher education, since the spring. It is disappointing it has come to this given the low numbers in our township. Please clarify when you expect to determine for sure that school will begin in person for the hybrid groups on October 1. Stacy Irvine, 42 Mount Airy Road. What will the first 3 days of school look like? Are they still half days to allow for teacher service afterward, or did that now change? Stella Perna, 105 Tuxford Terrace. Is there any way we can have virtual classes for Ridge start at 9 or 9:30 a.m.? Why start at 7:35 a.m. if there are only 4 periods a day except Wednesday? Also, has any load balancing testing been done with the online classroom application? Should all students be virtual indefinitely? Asking because Zoom had outages today in large geographic areas due to heavy usage. That is the last question. This is Gray.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Mr. Markarian, how would you like to handle this? Board member comments before your comments to the public, or the other way around?
We can run through and try to answer as much as we can and do that first.
All right.
On public comment.
Thank you.
Sure. Let's see here. So I think a few of the public comments were related to what is the reason for the delay to October 1st. The question somebody asked about the incident that we had last week with a positive test. Somebody said that, CDC, ADA, Dr. Fauci, they say go back to school. I think another person questioned the air filters. So, to try to kind of cover that, it's not about, and somebody else asked, why can't the teachers work if the grocery store folks can work? So it's not about, it's about what we described on 3 slides in the presentation, and that is the minimum requirements that we have to have according to our plan in order to be open. We have to have the staff, we have to have the PPE, and we need to double check all the mechanical equipment that's just become online, right? Those are the 3 key factors that are tied to our plan. It's not about, the teachers don't want to come back to work, or why can't they work like grocery store folks can work? It's about making sure those minimum conditions are met. And somebody asked about filtration. That's one of the issues with the mechanical equipment that has been a question off and on again for school administrators really across the state. The road back document does not describe specifically what is a level of filtration that you have to have on your mechanical equipment and your air supply. It's not specifically given, so you're trying to do your best research. You're trying to talk to professionals qualified in the field that can help you make those determinations. And then you got to look at every single piece of mechanical equipment in your district, which numbers hundreds and hundreds of pieces of equipment, to figure out what is the best filtration that you can put in those pieces of equipment. Then you've got to order that filter and you've got to get it installed. All of those things take time. That's a major issue for us. And of course, you know, imagine hundreds of pieces of equipment. When you turn the on switch, how many of them have a problem? You know, I mean, we know in our own homes, we have, you know, typically 1-2 pieces of mechanical equipment that are operating the HVAC in our houses. And that might break down once a year, you need a repair. Once every couple of years, you need a repair. We've got hundreds and hundreds of those pieces of equipment. On any given day, a piece of equipment could be down. On any given day, multiple pieces of equipment could be down. So for us, starting out the school year, turning all that mechanical equipment on takes a significant amount of time to make sure that everything is up and running. That's normal for us. Every summer, that's normal. What's not normal for us is having a requirement to open school with measurable specific markers like fresh air supply and certain kinds of filters. That's not normal for us. So that takes, that's gonna just take some extra time to deal with. That's really what we're talking about. So those key variables, right? It's the mechanical equipment, the staffing, the personal protective equipment, and getting all of our orders in. Transportation of sports teams. We're still planning on using Somerset County Ed Services Commission for transportation. You know, certainly it is a concern relative to putting students on buses. What we're required to do there is have students wear masks. That's really all the guidance that we have. Obviously, we space the students out as much as we can, but that is a challenge. As I mentioned, the diagnosis from last week was not affecting the decision about the timing of when we think we can start in person. Freshman orientation, I understand the question. You know, truthfully, we just want to make sure that we feel like everything that can be done has been done before we start bringing students in terms of all the safety. Again, the question about data, the data is low. Why can't we start now? It's not what the data is saying right now. It's what the minimum requirements are to open schools. I think that because the data is low right now, that's probably what's encouraging us to want to open schools and what is allowing the governor to say that we can open schools. But we still have these minimum requirements that we have to deal with. As far as the parking is concerned, I really think we're probably going to be dealing with seniors only again. I think with respect to some of the student schedules, there was a few questions there. Certainly the goal is to have much more frequent live communication with the students than we had last spring. There was a question associated with student schedules related to why do we have a 9-period day, 6-12, if we don't have lunch? Wouldn't that make for 8 periods if we're not running lunches? The issue is that at the 6-12 level, not everybody has lunch at the same time. So while period 5 might be lunch for some students, you can't eliminate period 5 because many other students are not eating lunch period 5, they have classes period 5. If we ran the type of schedule where we had 8 instructional periods and a unit lunch where everybody had lunch at the same time, you'd still have a 9-period day. You'd have 8 instructional periods and a unit lunch period. You'd have 9 periods. And if you weren't doing lunch where everybody ate lunch at the same time, I agree, you'd be able to drop that unit lunch and you'd have 8 periods, but that's not where we are. We do have, as part of our policy, that was one of the language changes that was updated in terms of how to apply for switches between virtual and remote, between the 100% virtual learning model and the blending learning model. That is in the document. It's also in a letter that I sent out last week or the week before for anybody that needs that information. Question came up about sports. Would kids still be able to participate in sports? Again, as it's governed by the NJSIAA, if they're saying certain teams are still going to be able to practice and compete, largely the outdoor teams, then the answer to that question is yes, the students will still be able to do that. The details on the first 3 days of the schedule in terms of the first day for students, that being the 3rd, and the second day for students, that being the 8th. We do intend to make those abbreviated day schedules for in-service in the afternoon, the 3rd and the 8th. Correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Fox.
That's correct.
And then the second thing you might be able to help on, and I didn't quite get the whole question, there was a question about the difference between 100% virtual and the blended learning, but I wasn't sure I quite followed that one. I don't know if you have that in writing. That
Well,
you might be able to...
I think you're referring to the question that asked if the students at home during the blended learning would be zooming in to the class. That was one question.
Right. Yes.
And so
yeah.
The answer is that they will be. They will be coming into the beginning of class for attendance, and they will be attending class as the teacher sort of requires them to.
Right. Right. The difference in September, though, is everybody's coming in at the same time. So I think the question was about when we get to the in-person models, what happens with the blended learning students on the days that they're not in the building, which is what you described, that they still participate in the class, but they have to do it by zooming in from their remote location.
Correct.
Okay. And then I think the last thing was associated with the student medical information form. I know that I'd asked Mr. Crute to take a look at that. Did you have any feedback on that question, Mr. Crute, with regard to the student information form on the medical information from Genesis?
Yeah, just very generally, the school district is permitted to, and for a lot of the information is required to maintain health information on students, and also, it's important for the parents to understand that all that information is protected by New Jersey student health records, and also by FERPA, the federal law on student health records. So, although some of the information is required for the school to maintain, and it certainly is important for the school to maintain, parents should understand that it can't just be shared, with people that don't have a need to have that information, like medical professionals and things. There was some reference to HIPAA, and just so people understand, HIPAA generally does not apply to schools, to public schools. It's a law related to transfer of medical records, and it applies to organizations that bill for medical services and things like that. So that generally doesn't apply in those situations.
Okay, thank you. And I think that
What
was
about
it.
Mr. Markarian? So the
Yeah.
related question to that had to do with the underlying conditions that was on the form when we did the readiness drill. I was thinking Rita might be able to respond to that.
Yeah, I'd like to. So originally when we started sports for the summer workouts, NJSIA put out a list of questions that they wanted us to ask for screening. And so we used their screening tool. They also required that if anyone had a health condition, that we asked for medical clearance. And so that's what we did. We followed NJSIA guidance. Going forward in September, or when we return to school, the screening, the daily screening form that we use does not ask anything about pre-existing conditions. What it does say on there as one of the questions is that if your child has a pre-existing condition, you should consult with your own private physician regarding their ability to come into school or any risks that they may have. So we don't ask for any pre-existing conditions at all on the form.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that. And I think that was about it.
Mr. Salmon.
Quick follow-up question. Do you, Chris, and I guess expect to do re-cohorting in September, late September or sometime, given that the numbers have changed in terms of like virtual blended?
So we've been working on that as the changes have been coming in and constantly doing what we can to rebalance, right? So that's been one of our challenges, but we've been rebalancing as that's, almost daily to the degree that we can. Someone did ask the question about whether they would be allowed to make the choice again, now that we're not coming in until October 1st, and I'm not sure we have an answer to that yet. Certainly something we have discussed, but we'd have to probably get back to you on that unless you want to answer that, Mr. Markarian.
Yeah, I think what I said about that question is that we have a process in place. We have language
Right.
describing how we would try to accommodate that, and I would stick to that process.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Schaefer.
Could I just ask a question? I think this may just apply for the high school, but if students request a schedule change, they drop a class, they add a class, will they potentially also affect their cohorts when we get back to that because of the balancing issue? But and the trickle down on that might be crazy.
Well, we did consider that, and we certainly, when course change requests are made this week, it's a course change request, and those are considered based on seat availability in the course. So part of that seat availability will also include the cohort size. So if a student wants to asks to move into a class that actually has seats available when you combine them, but not in the cohort, then we wouldn't be able to honor that request for that reason, because we do need to maintain the cohort size for the return.
Will we still allow level changes?
Yes,
so if a student needs
absolutely.
to drop drop from an honors to a regular or something.
Yes.
Okay.
And to that point, we did everything we could to build in sort of some room for that, knowing that that might sort of increase this fall based on the spring experience. So we did what we could to build in some room for that level change to occur later in October.
Mrs. McCune had a question.
Yeah, I think I wanted to clarify what I think one of the questions may have been asking, and then ask you guys to just explain a little bit, because I know there's so much confusion. I've been looking at this stuff all summer long, and it's hard to get your head around, you know what I mean, and keep track of it all with the schedules. I think the one question about would the kids who are remote be doing the same thing as the ones, you know what I mean, as the rest of the kids. I think maybe the question was also, are the 100% remote kids having the same instruction as the hybrid or now the fully remote in September kids? So I think it's a little bit different at the high school and middle school versus the elementary school. So maybe, Kristen, you can speak to that.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, it is different between the elementary and the secondary level. At the secondary level, so grade 6 through 12, we will have the students' schedule was built regardless of whether they were virtual or hybrid, right? And so the students choosing virtual remain on in the same classes that they would be in if we were going back to school normally. So the students would attend classes on their schedule, regardless of hybrid or virtual. And then the way they attend them, right, is Zooming in for attendance. And then depending on the way the teacher is running the lesson that day, they may stay the whole time or they may work independently. So that's at the 6-12 level. Does that make sense? And then K-5, it's a little different, right? Because the instructional model is different. We're looking to increase, like to Mr. Salmon's point, small group instruction. And that's not gonna work if you have 24 kids on a Zoom or 12 in class and 12 Zooming in. So we're working, we've organized the K-5 virtual only students into classes with a virtual only teacher. Right, so they will institute or implement the same instructional model, but virtually. But those students who are 100% virtual at the K-5 level will have their own virtual only teacher. And they will participate, with their class and their activities following that same similar schedule that I shared on the slide tonight.
Okay, thank you for explaining for everyone. And then the other comment or question that has come out, maybe just in my head from talking to other people too, is the a little confusion about what happens in the afternoon. You showed the third grade example now of what goes on in the afternoon in elementary school, but at Ridge and WAMS, after the periods are over, especially the 4 shorter days of periods where it's not Wednesday, there's still instruction going on, because I think some people have asked, well, why don't we make the day longer? And I think that people maybe aren't clear what kind of instruction might be going on during the virtual tutorial pink part of the chart. So maybe you could talk about that.
So when we're in school in the hybrid model, some of that time is travel time, right? And then lunch and some teacher prep time, and then some Zoom tutorial check-in time that is intended for opportunities for teachers to work with students individually, sometimes scheduled, and sometimes when a student just needs help. So there, to the best of my knowledge, there isn't a formal schedule developed for that, and there may not be, but sort of that we're looking for teachers to work with students who really are the ones who need help. And it's really intended for the students who were at home that day, like their instruction was remote that day, not the students who were in school, but the students who were remote who may have followed along to a lesson remotely, but then have a question in order to kind of complete whatever they're working on, as well as the virtual only students, right? So the students who are virtual only, they fall in that same bucket. That's what that virtual tutorial is intended for.
Okay, thank you.
As a piggyback to that, Ms. Fox, can you just clarify for everyone watching the reasoning behind the half schedule one day and then the half schedule the next day? And I think it fits with what you just described, but then what those students would be doing because it's a shortened day?
So you mean like now because we're 100% virtual, or just mean just in general in the way we develop the schedule?
I think what I'm getting at is because we're now all virtual, I think one of the questions on some people's minds is why
didn't we just extend the day?
And
why doesn't it
make every day like Wednesday? Is that the question?
Sure. Yeah.
Such a great day. Why not just have them all be Wednesday?
Well, we certainly did discuss that and whether that would be a preferable way to approach it. But there's a couple of things. One, we're transitioning back to school in 17 days. And it's not as long a period of time as it might seem. And so we feel like it would be better to implement the schedule that we're going to be implementing in October so that everybody gets used to it. And then we're not sending another schedule in 3 weeks that everybody needs to get used to again. That's one reason. But also with the virtual model, you're looking at 4 50-minute blocks of time where students may be, zooming in and doing work with the teacher. And so we feel like instructionally, it would be better for the students themselves to take a break, to take lunch, and then work independently on their work and get extra help where they need it, rather than having classes all day long and no opportunity for that sort of independent offline work or more individual work, perhaps with the teacher, as opposed to a whole class. So there's like a variety of reasons where we think that would be better for students. And then we're also building in time for the teachers to be developing, right, lessons for 2 completely different learning environments and collaborating with their course levels across the building or even the district, depending on the grade. So there's a bunch of reasons why we thought that was the best model, and that keeping it helps us transition in October.
Thank you. Mr. Salmon?
Sorry about that. So when the kids in elementary school get their teachers, the kids that opted into the hybrid model will get 1 teacher. The kids that opted in the virtual model will get 2 teachers, right? They'll get their homeroom teacher and their virtual teacher.
No, they'll really just, the virtual only students who chose virtual only would get their 1 teacher. It is a virtual only teacher.
Okay, got it. All right.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing no additional questions from the board, I think we're ready to move on to Superintendent's report.
Thank you. So just following along on the agenda for tonight, we do have one item under Superintendent's report, which is really to approve the submission of the return to instruction plan that we just went over. This would be the final draft, if you will, that incorporated the changes required not only from the executive county superintendent from the rough draft, but also the changes that came to us on August 13th relative to adjustments the New Jersey Department of Health prescribed on some of the screening forms that Ms. Zarabera went over, and also pursuant to Executive Order 175, making sure that we have the necessary minimum requirements taken care of and setting a date by which we believe that those minimum requirements will be taken care of. So all of those things kind of wrapped up together represent the singular item under Superintendent's report, which essentially authorizes me to submit the final draft of the plan to the Executive County Superintendent, and also authorizes me to sign off on whatever document the Department of Education prescribes to attest that we have met all of the requirements of the road back plan. And that attestation, as the state has been calling it, might be a simple form that they ask me to attest to, but it sounds as though they will actually make it into a statement of assurance rather than an attestation form. And my understanding is that the statement of assurance form is in fact being developed. It's not created or finalized at this time, but the board resolution does authorize me to sign whichever document they require, whether it be a simple attestation form or a statement of assurance. However it finally gets developed, that is what this resolution does. It approves the submission of the plan as well as signing off on the form.
So with that, do we need a roll call or a motion, I should say?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon and Mrs. Wooldridge. And Mr. McLaughlin, can we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray.
Yes.
Madam President,
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. So just before we move on, I've gotten a couple of messages from Ms. Fox letting me know that some of the public comment that's come in is absent of an address, and it is a requirement for having your public comment read into the record that you include your address. So if you've sent in a comment and you remember that you did not include your address, if you could just send your name and address so that when we get to the next public comment session, Ms. Fox is able to read in your public comment. We would appreciate that. And with that, our next item is the Finance Committee report. Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Yeah. Wait, we have no minutes?
Oh, did I miss it? Oh, yes, I did. I'm sorry. We have approval of minutes. I scrolled too far up. Mr. Salmon and Mrs. McCune. And a roll call, please, Mr. McLaughlin.
Of course. Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray.
Yes.
Madam President,
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Mr. Salmon, the Finance Committee report.
Finance met on Wednesday, August 19th. The first item for discussion was our fall in-district transportation. The committee met with Mr. Ford from Del Val High School, who updated us on his discussions with Kensington and Barker, the companies that were awarded the contracts for the district's in-district transportation for 2020-21. Mr. Ford said both companies are hiring drivers and will be in a position to provide transportation for the start of school. We do not currently know how many students will be on a given bus at a given time, but now that cohorts have been determined, Mr. Ford is building the routes for the hybrid students and subscription bussers. On subscription side, we have 120 subscriptions this year. Typically in a given year or normal year, we have 290. The buses will be disinfected between AM and PM runs. Drivers, students, and aide will wear masks on the buses. Hand sanitizer will be available on buses. However, students may bring and use their own hand sanitizer. The second item for discussion was the Ridge High School Middle Gym project. As previously reported, there was an issue with moisture in the concrete slab underneath the gym floor. Mr. McLaughlin worked with the contractor and the wood floor manufacturer to implement the remediation that was recommended by the manufacturer for the moisture in the concrete slab. A pool-type liner was used to seal the slab and required less labor and cost than the original remediation plan. So the remediation was $6,000 instead of $34,000. The next item was a discussion of the various hygiene products that are being installed and deployed about the district and the buildings. Paper towel dispensers, 198 out of 200 have been installed. There were still 2 at Liberty Corner to be installed. These are the automatic paper towel dispensers. Automatic soap dispensers, all 150 that have been ordered have been installed. The automatic hand sanitizers, Mr. McLaughlin ordered 450 from a company called Atra. They were supposed to deliver over the summer. They were never delivered, and they never updated us on any delivery information. So we reordered from Staples, and we have received 450 freestanding hand sanitizer stations. Of these stations, approximately 100 stations are for common areas and entrances. The no-touch faucets in bathrooms, all installations at elementary schools have been completed, and installations at WAMS and Ridge are ongoing. For the UV air fixtures in the nurse's office and training offices, all ordered units have been installed. However, there were areas in the Ridge High School nurse's office that weren't originally accounted for, so we are ordering 3 more fixtures. In terms of consumables, we have a stock of hand sanitizer, wipes, and paper towels, and Mr. McLaughlin is continually monitoring our inventory as such. The next item was a discussion of the New Jersey health plan reforms that was recently signed into law by Governor Murphy in July of 2020. That created a new state health plan, the New Jersey Educators Health Plan and the Garden State Health Plan. Essentially, Arthur Gallagher went over the various points of each plan, when each plan is going to be implemented, and how that plan impacts our district as we are self-insured. Arthur Gallagher is going to meet with the BTEA to go over the new plans. The next item on discussion was the district's consulting engineer, Mr. Mistretta. Mr. Mistretta explained that all HVAC systems in the district meet current code requirements. He went through various options for modifying those HVAC systems to enhance the air quality within the buildings. Mr. Mistretta stressed several times that none of the measures are guaranteed to prevent spread or transmission of COVID-19, and he's not sure what impact, if any of the measures outlined might have. There were 4 measures discussed under a consortium called ASHRAE that had various recommendations. One was dilution ventilation, which was basically increasing the ventilation and circulation of air throughout the buildings. Another one was filtration, which was changing some of the filters we have from a MERV 14 to a different MERV level. There was another option about installing different plenums on the rooftop units, putting UV air circulation systems in, or purifying systems in the ducts and air handlers, and went through all of these various options. Some are way too expensive. I mean, some of them are, thousands of dollars per classroom. So he went through costing for each of the items. In terms of dilution, so the committee decided that dilution, ventilation, and filtration are items that we can follow up on that aren't very cost prohibitive. So Mr. McLaughlin will contact AME, which is the HVAC system programmer for the district, about reprogramming the HVAC systems to implement dilution ventilation measures, and we'll follow up with Mr. Mistretta about obtaining new filters with different with enhanced MERV levels to enhance our filtration. The next item was introduction of the transportation coordinator for the district. Janet Lubzach will start Monday in the central office to work with Mr. Ford on a regular basis on all transportation issues. There was an update provided on the Ridge High School cafeteria project. For the hybrid model, Dr. Lazovic wants to use the cafeteria at Ridge for study halls to keep the students spaced out. And we don't want to compress the space to accommodate construction. And we don't want contractors going in and out of the cafeteria around those students while they're in school. So the question was raised whether we should postpone the project bid or for 1 year. However, if schools are closed in the spring, this would be an opportune time to complete the construction. So we decided to wait to see what happens more on this issue about whether schools remain open. There was an update about the Ridge inspection of the sanitary lines at Ridge High School. Mr. McLaughlin worked with Tony Katana, who is the district's architect at Spiesel, to image all sanitary lines at Ridge, and several were in need of repair. So that process is ongoing right now, where Mr. Katana and Spiesel are going to come in and design a plan to remediate the eroded sanitary lines and replace them with lines that would run overhead. That work will be planned over the next few weeks, and then the work will be completed probably sometime starting in, or will be initiated sometime starting in September, and takes about 3 weeks to a month. The final item was an update on the fiscal year end and reminders about state aid and extraordinary aid from the state. Based on Mr. McLaughlin's assumptions regarding extraordinary aid for 1920, the district should have approximately $2.2 million for contingencies in 2021, and state aid and extraordinary aid for 2020 will not be known until September. For items that are on the agenda, 1 through 3 are standing items. 4 is professional development. 5 is accepting a donation from T-Mobile for purchase of tablet computers for staff. So thank you very much to T-Mobile. 6 is approves an assignment of a contract with Rubinetti for waste disposal to a company called Interstate Waste Services, which acquired Rubinetti's waste disposal company. 7 and 8 approve award of the ESY transportation to the Del Val Regional High School Transportation and Barker Bus, which already happened. 9 and 10 are settlements, and 11 through 25 are out-of-district special education placements for 2021 and extended school year in 2021. Thank you.
Mrs. Korn has a question.
My only question is, does our delayed opening affect the buses at all? Like our bus, the agreement we have with the bus companies?
So we haven't signed the contracts with them, but there was a provision that we were going to include about what happened and what type of payment terms would be expected if there was a school closure during any time that they're under contract with us. But Rod, if you have any other information on that.
I think you're on point with that comment. We would need to pay them something in order to ensure that they're going to be there for us when presumably we start busing students in October. So we did make a provision for that to be adjusted when we're out of the office or out of the district for in person for any extended period of time.
Pursuant to a state mandated closure.
Well, I think we could make the argument that we're still under the executive order, and that executive order says that if we don't meet the minimum requirements.
Am I the only one that can't understand, Rod?
Yeah, I think we're on the right track, but we have to chase that down a little bit to be sure how it's going to play out. But I do agree that we have a provision and we do have an executive order that guides us. So those two things together.
I'm trying not to have the conversation here that we haven't had with the contractors yet.
Right. I agree, which is why I don't want to make any promises.
Right.
Any other questions for Mr. Salmon? Can I have a motion to approve the finance items? Mrs. Wooldridge and Mrs. White. And a roll call.
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray.
Yes.
Madam President.
Thank you. Our next item is the Personnel Committee report, and I'd like to thank Mrs. McCune for kindly sitting in for me so I could take my daughter to college. And Mrs. McCune, did you want to share anything?
Sure. The Personnel Committee just met on Friday, so I just got the minutes out. So most of the meeting was talking about all of the different staffing challenges during COVID and trying to reopen the schools, which was already discussed during the presentation. We heard from all the principals at the meeting about some of their challenges, and it kind of spilled into other challenges of reopening, which were kind of summarized in the presentation. And we, there's an addendum for personnel, so there's 40 items. I just wanted to draw your attention to number 40, if Nick or Sean wants to say a word about number 40 before we vote, and then we can vote.
Sure. We are very pleased. Mr. McLaughlin, Mr. Syed, and I conducted interviews recently to select a new director of facilities. You might recall our last director of facilities left at the end of June. So we've been working a little bit to try to cover that position internally. So we're very pleased to have Mr. Doug Marino on the agenda, on the addendum agenda item, to be our new director of facilities. Doug comes to us with many years in the industry, in particular with experience, a lot of experience in mechanical equipment for facilities like schools. That should go a long way in helping us with our efforts in our HVAC system. So we're really looking forward to having Doug on board, and I appreciate the board's support in having him on the agenda tonight.
So can we have a motion to Mr. Salmon and Mrs. McCune? And a roll call?
Ms. Beckman,
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer,
Yes.
Mr. Salmon,
Yes.
Mrs. White,
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond,
Yes.
Mrs. Korn,
Yes.
Mrs. Wooldridge,
Yes.
Mrs. McCune,
Yes.
Mrs. Gray. Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. McLaughlin. Our next item is the Policy Committee report form.
Thanks. This is great. So the policy committee met on August 17th, and the discussion was there's about the draft return to instruction plan, which goes with our policy number 1648, which is the restart and recovery plan, which I think they went over in great detail during the presentation. And we also voted on the resolution to submit, and that was part of the draft return to instruction plan. We also have a bunch of policies for first reading. I'm going to just go through those. The first would be the restart and recovery plan, which is what we are essentially what we're handing in to be approved. The board member participation, it's policy 0155.1, board member participation at board meetings using electronic devices. This policy was revised with the language to include that board members who, when we go back to live meetings, if board members want to have an emergency or have to remote in while we're live, it would have to include like a health concern, serious unavoidable conflict, or another good cause in order to miss the live meeting or to remote into a live meeting. The board member must submit the request in writing as early as possible if the conflict is known as in advance. If it is a last minute conflict, there still must be a written request. Request will be submitted as a resolution for board approval on the next meeting agenda. The board will discuss any personal details in executive session and approve or deny at the start of the public session. There'll be no more than 2 board members may be remote at the same meeting, and no board member may request to be remote more than 3 times. The next policy would be the policy 2431.3. It's the heat participation policy for student athlete safety. And it was amended to reflect the new statute that requires school districts to adopt and implement the New Jersey State Interscholastic Athletic Association heat participation policy for student athletes. Policy 2622 is a student assessment. The revision reflects the new requirements to administer an elementary school level statewide assessment for science through grade 5. It was previously was only required through grade 4. Policy and regulation 5111 is the eligibility of resident, non-resident students. This was updated to reflect a statutory change that says districts cannot declare a student ineligible for enrollment on the basis of the New Jersey Motor Vehicle Commission does not have information on the parent. And it added clarity on considerations for J1 visa students. Policy and regulation 5200, which is attendance. The policy and regulation guides 5200 have been revised to provide more detailed explanation on the distinction between attendance recording in the school register and attendance recording pursuant to NJAC 6A 16-7, unexcused absences that count towards truancy. Policy and regulation 5320, which is immunization, was revised to provide additional guiding language to more closely align with the structure of the controlling administrative code. Very, very clear there. Policy and regulation 5330-.04 is administering an opioid antidote. And it's pursuant to the recently published guidance documents. The policy and regulation guides have been revised to provide greater detail regarding the physician's standing orders, the training requirements for those employees designated to administer the opioid antidote, the replacement of the opioid antidote upon expiration, the administration of the antidote, and the limitation of liability attached with administering the antidote. Policy and regulation 5610, which is suspension, and policy 5620, which is expulsion. They were updated to reflect the new requirements for the principal to convene a meeting between the student and appropriate school personnel after a student has experienced multiple suspensions or may be subject to a proposed expulsion from public school. A policy and regulation 8320, which is personnel records. It outlines and defines which aspects of an employee record that is publicly available, such as name, title, position, and length of service. On the agenda for second reading would be the Families Federal First Coronavirus Response Act. And that's the, includes the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Expansion Act and the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. And it just expands the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act, and the EPSLA provides employees with the paid sick leave for specified reasons related to COVID-19. And it should apply from April 1st, 2020 through December 31st, 2020. So those are all the, that was the whole policy meeting, if anyone has any questions.
Any questions for Mrs. Corn? Thank you, Mrs. Corn. Can I have a motion, please? Mrs. Schaefer and Mrs. White. And a roll call, please, Mr. McLaughlin.
Ms. Beckman?
Yes.
Ms. Schaefer?
Yes.
Mr. Salmon?
Yes.
Mrs. White?
Yes.
Mrs. Richmond?
Yes.
Mrs. Corn?
Yes.
Mrs. Woolbridge?
Yes.
Mrs. McHugh?
Yes.
Mrs. Gray?
Yes.
Madam President.
Thank you. And our next agenda item is the Curriculum Committee report. Mrs. Richmond?
Curriculum met on August 14th, and the minutes are out with the committee, and they're still under review and haven't gone out to the whole board yet. So I will report out on that at the next meeting.
Thank you. And our next item is the Wellness Committee report. Mrs. White.
Wellness has not met yet this summer, so we'll be meeting again in September.
Okay, thank you. And then does anyone have any liaison committee reports? Okay, I don't think so. And now we are up to public comment on non-agenda items. If any are still being written as we speak, please remember your address and your name. And with that, Mrs. Fox.
Okay. So this first one is from Carmen Yanazzo, 41 Aspen Drive, Cedar Hill. Hello all, thank you for your time this evening. For households with children in different grades, will lunch hours be coordinated so that all children can take lunch break at the same time? Daniel Clarkin, 84 Highland Ave. I am extremely disappointed that in the 6 months since the schools were closed, the return to school plan fell on its face before it even began. If we ran private companies in a similar manner, we would have all lost our jobs 3 months ago. Catholic schools and private schools have no issue reopening, and while finances could play a role for some districts, our district is very well funded. So I must attribute our current situation to lack of leadership on your part. If the BOE is unable to guarantee the same level of services to our students, they should resign right after they get the teachers union to give back whatever % of their members' salaries that are owed because of the very short amount of time the teachers will actually be performing their jobs. Private industry has had to cut our employee salaries, 401k contributions, and even furloughed, laid off individuals. As far as I'm aware, no cuts have been made, but the amount of time teachers will be performing their jobs is well below what was negotiated during the last contract. Carl Bird, 3 Village Drive. Thank you for making the right call to keep our students, teachers, and communities safe. As you move forward, please articulate your plan to the coaches in your district. As a neighbor of the high school, we saw firsthand the football players in a huddle the morning before the COVID announcement was made. This seems to be not only irresponsible, but a violation of the NJSIAA guidelines for practices at this time. We need to make sure that 100% of the faculty and students follow the plan thoroughly. We are only as strong as our weakest link. My name is Abby Plaza and I live at 6 Frederick Court, Basking Ridge. As most students are, I am very disappointed and dreading a virtual learning schedule. While reading the reasoning for the virtual model, I would like to advocate that students don't need time to adjust to a hybrid schedule. I would like to know what is going to change between now until October with the preparation of building, and why could the changes not have been done over the summer? So what are the reasons to why we are not attending in-person school related to actual concerns about contracting the virus? Jamie Dweck, 5 Joanna Court. Thank you for all of your efforts. As parents, we appreciate the availability of so much information and you're keeping us so well informed. Will teachers be teaching from home or from the school during the 100% virtual time period? Do the schools have enough bandwidth for most classes to Zoom live? Thank you for your time. Ava Deffenbaugh, 3633 Valley Liberty Corner. Parent and teacher, not Bernard's. Question, last spring teachers at RHS created standardized curriculum for each subject with mandated standardized assessment. Teachers had no opportunity to modify instruction or assessment for students without IEPs. They were given no discretion in their classrooms. Will this be the same situation, or will teachers be able to modify as appropriate? Mr. Markarian, can you answer now, please? Thank you. Melanie Dupuy, 70 Quincy Road, Basking Ridge. Good evening. My name is Melanie Dupuy, co-president of the Bernards Township Education Association. This has been a summer that none of us could have ever expected or could have ever been fully prepared for. Despite the continuing success of New Jersey to limit the spread and reduce the rate of transmission, it is important to recognize that we need to remain vigilant to ensure our schools are the safest environments for our students to learn and our staff to work. It is human nature to want to return to normal living and normal school. Our teachers cannot wait to greet your children at our door, to participate in our school and community activities. but nothing about this is normal. Nothing about this is easy. Nothing about this is routine. Teachers want nothing more than to be in classrooms with their students, but it needs to be safe. The association has worked tirelessly for months to work collaboratively with administration to develop the safest possible plan to return to buildings. We want to thank the members of the administrative team and the Board of Education for taking the steps necessary to ensure the safest environment possible for our staff and students. The BTEA is committed to continuing the work with administration to prepare for a safe return in October. As we prepare to begin the year virtually, please know that Bernards Township teachers, counselors, and support staff have been hard at work all summer preparing for the new school year. There have been countless hours of curriculum writing, faculty meetings, and technology training designed to enhance our communication and delivery of both hybrid and virtual instruction models. To assist our community during these unprecedented times, starting on September 1st, the BTEA will be offering evening clinics for our parents, grandparents, and caregivers to learn about the various technology platforms, instructional approaches, and organizational tools that will assist those who may need help navigating their children's educational experiences. Clinic opportunities will be posted on our social media pages, and we encourage our community to participate so we can all team together for the children of Bernards Township. Your educators are looking forward to a great year with the same energy, enthusiasm, and excellence that Bernards Township is known for and prides itself in, though it will indeed be a challenge. But together as the Bernards Township team for the Bernards Township community, we will make it work. Miss Youngerman, 255 Potomac Drive. It's very hard for kids with an IEP to learn and do their work from home. I was really looking forward to my daughter to start school and go 5 half days. These kids will refuse to do their work online. Olivia Wintermute, 453 King George Road. Please explain how the school district was able to support children with special needs in the schools 3 weeks ago for extended school year, and now you are requiring all students to be remote until October 1st. Please advise why those same students cannot be supported in person in September, since most of their schedules were requiring them in person 5 days per week. Susan Ward, 46 Northbrook Avenue. Good evening. Thank you all sincerely for your efforts to make this year's educational experience the best it can be. What is the district backup plan in terms of educational continuity, both for in-person and virtual students, if a group of teachers become ill or have to quarantine because of contact with an infected individual? Thank you again. Pam Malari, 79 Fieldstone Drive. For the WAM schedule, is it possible that teachers will use the virtual tutorial time slot and mandating attendance for a student? What span of time within that slot, 1:15 to 2 o'clock, will be used for teacher prep? This information is important in order to plan afternoons. Also, when do you expect feedback on the plan from the DOE? Scott Horniak, 24 Summit Drive. What is the threshold of positive COVID cases by which the Bernards BOE considers it acceptable for in-school learning? It feels as though there is not a threshold that has been agreed upon or that it has continued to move. If the threshold is 0, we will never reach that, as the vaccine will likely not be approved for pediatrics nor be mandatory. Thank you. James Schubert, 18 Sterling Lane. Will A and B students be mixed in the same class? Jen Youngerman, 255 Potomac Drive. I think she had a question. I understand that St. James is part of the church and they are able to open in September and be all day for classes. It is going to be very hard for my daughter, who has an IEP in reading and writing, to do her schoolwork from home. It was extremely hard to get her to do it last year. There will be lots of kids not doing their work or participating in the Zoom meetings. I am not able to take time away from my job to sit with her to go over the work until I sign off at 5 p.m. each day. I'm a single parent and was really looking forward to her starting in person 5 half days, and now that she will have to do the work from home, it's going to be a nightmare. And that is the last public comment.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Mr.
Oh,
Markarian,
I'm
you want-
sorry. I'm sorry. I missed there. That wasn't the last. I apologize. Harrison Tang, 175 Patriot Hill. Are there contingency plans should the internet cable modem shared lines become saturated and unusable? Wanning Wu at 15 Conkling Street, Basking Ridge. What's the advisory period in the schedule for? What will students be doing during that time? Jeff Kramer and Heather Watson Kramer, 84 Liberty Corner Road. Dear Mr. Markarian and Board of Education members, we would like to thank you for increasing the number of SATs that Ridge is hosting this fall. It is a great help to our seniors as application deadlines are quickly approaching. Will the district now being 100% virtual in September affect these SATs? Will they still be held at Ridge? We appreciate everything you are doing for our students. We know it isn't an easy task. Pooja Gandhi, 10 Hancock Court, Basking Ridge. Question, how will MAP testing be administered in fall for virtual students? Lisa Plout, 23 Hartley Lane. Will physical textbooks be distributed to students? Elaine Daddario, 46 Dykeman Place. How are absences handled with missing under quarantine? Guidelines with the high number of days absent, as well as general absences for taking license tests, college visits, etc., as there was a limit in previous years, but now might be higher number of absences under these conditions. How will work be made up when missed? What is new protocols and absence limits? How is attendance being managed this year versus last spring and previous years? Are students considered present in school unless they don't show up or check in rather than logging in each day to say present? My son will hopefully be getting his license on 9/9/20. So now he is missing his first full virtual day. How does that work now? Not the type of junior year I was hoping for and do not know how this will be at all prep for college. Thank you for any light you can shed. And Kristen Gannon, 4 Woodstone Road. Please consider pushing start times later for middle school and high school if we are 100% virtual. This was a very important agenda item for you pre-COVID. Deepak Gandhi, 10 Hancock Court. How can we best utilize music, musical instruments, sports, remote classes for better student engagement and mental health? Can we make it more motivational? And that is the last comment.
Thank you, Ms. Fox. Mr. Markarian, would you like to try to address as many of those as you think you might be able to?
Sure. Back a page. Okay, so the first question I think was about lunch schedules being coordinated.
Right.
I don't think they're exactly at the same time, K-5, 6, 12.
No.
That's a function of just the school day and the school start times. The question of cutting teacher salaries because of time on task, I don't think that the teachers are going to be putting in any less time. In fact, I think they're going to be putting in more time. I know a lot of the teachers put in a lot of time this summer, even without compensation. Teachers teaching from home or at school. So during this virtual time period in September, I anticipate a mix of teachers teaching both from home and also at school. Once we get to in-person instruction starting, the teachers that are teaching fully virtually will be teaching from home. And on Wednesdays at the 6-12 level, the teachers would be teaching from home or from school. There was a question about the modification of standardized assessments. I wasn't sure if that was about standardized assessments or sort of collaboratively designed tests that might have been the same across sections. Did you catch that at all, Ms. O'Connell?
I thought the question was about non-IEP students, but just to reiterate, if a student has an IEP that a test needs to be modified, that will be done. So I think parents have to be reassured that anything that is in an IEP will and has to be followed, and we'll make sure no matter what our schedule is, that that takes place.
Okay, thank you. There was a question about the challenge of students being motivated to do work when not in school. I think that the goal of our schedule is to try to increase accountability for the times that students have to be there, with the goal being to increase that sort of motivation that, hey, you have to be here, the work has to be done, we're taking attendance every period, and you have to check in live. So that's part of the goal, to increase their engagement by doing that. The question came about extended school year programs versus the start of classes in fall. Over the summer, we had a completely separate set of guidance for summer camps and requirements for running summer camps. At the time, extended school year was lumped together with summer camps, and there's a new set of requirements in the Road Back document for being able to offer in-school instruction in the fall. So there is a difference between what we had to do for the summer and what we have to do for the fall. As far as feedback from the Department of Education, I don't know the timeline as to when the county superintendent would provide any feedback. I did discuss it with him preliminarily, so he knows what our issues are and why we're looking to hold back until October 1st. And I don't anticipate a problem from his end. The question came up about the threshold. What threshold would it require? I think the important thing for us at this moment isn't that we're talking about a requirement threshold that is holding us back from starting school. Really, it goes back to those 3 slides with respect to our staffing, our mechanical equipment, and really making sure the PPE is delivered and in place, and all the installations of our hygiene equipment are also in place. So that's really what's driving this. It's not about a particular threshold level, although I think if you focus on the New Jersey Department of Health document that I linked to the presentation, it does give you calculations and metrics associated with how they are computing the level of concern in the community, whether you're in the red, the green, the yellow, or the orange zone, is all a mathematic computation. And if you look at the math at the end of that document, it does give you some insight, but there's no magical formula. And I tried to kind of highlight that it really comes down to working with the health department on the local level with each situation that arises. I'm sorry, I can't really speak to what's going on at St. James. Contingencies for technology. There's no question that technology is going to be a critical factor, like it is in our day-to-day operations every day. When email goes down, when anything crashes, it's a problem. That certainly is an exposure, whether it's using Zoom or Google Meet. There are a wide range of online applications that the students are using. So we do want to make sure that we're doing the best that we can in supporting our networks, and we've been investing a lot in that. I know that we've got a lot of switches that have been purchased for our network over the summer. We have a high level of broadband that we increased recently. So I think we're going to be in pretty good shape, but obviously there's no guarantees that things are not going to have downtime. The SATs is a good question. I know that we do have an SAT scheduled at Ridge. I believe it's on Saturday, the 26th. We were talking about that today. Conditions unchanging, staying reasonably good, or perhaps even improving between now and September 26th. We currently do not have a plan to cancel the SATs on the 26th. We are still planning on having that. Obviously, things could happen, but right now we're planning on holding that. And I know that Ms. Fox has done a lot of legwork to even see if we can try to get an ACT scheduled for Ridge High School. We haven't gotten confirmation on whether or not that's going to be possible yet, but we are pursuing that pretty aggressively. I don't know if we've had much conversation about MAP testing in the fall or not, Ms. Fox, but I'm not sure that's going to be possible.
We've discussed it. It is potential that it could be done virtually, but we're going to discuss that this week.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know what kind of testing NEWA could set up for that.
Yeah, they will. It can work. So we are in discussion about making that happen.
Okay. I understand the question about pushing start times back relative to the middle school and the high school. You know, honestly, if we're going to get back to our regular schedule in October, it's probably better to try to get them into the routine of the timing for September. And then hopefully that's a smooth transition for October by then. Textbook distribution is a good question. I don't know if that's come up with any of the conversations with the principals. I know we were talking about it with one principal in terms of packets for students to pick up.
Yes, we will work on that as well.
And we have a meeting tomorrow with the principals, so we can talk about that then.
Yep, we will continue to talk about that.
I'm sure that building level communication would go out about that issue.
Absolutely. There will be distribution. We will just be working on the plans to do that.
Yeah. You know, the question about attendance and quarantine, I mean, look, you know, it's an unprecedented situation that kids might have to be home on quarantine, and we certainly have no intention about penalizing students who have to be home on quarantine and counting it against them or withholding credit. You know, our goal would be to try to help students get the work done while they have to be out on quarantine. Hopefully there isn't too much of that happening. I don't see A and B students being mixed in the same class. Once we start in-person instruction, the goal of the cohorting, the A-day cohort and the B-day cohort, is to keep the students in separate groupings, so they should not be mixed. I think that's about it.
Thank you, Mr. Markarian. Mrs. Schaefer.
There was one question, and I wanted to ask Ms. Smith, who's been so patiently sitting with us, about that advisory period. We haven't had a wellness committee meeting in a while, so we haven't been able to report out what the intent is for that at the high school, and just the high school, right? Not the middle school. I mean, since somebody asked a question, are we allowed to have her answer it?
Sure. It's
at the middle and the high school.
Yeah, it's 612.
612. It is intended for in-person instruction more than it is intended for this virtual only transitional period. However, you know, we will certainly be looking to see where we may be able to make use of that time with some of the things we would like to do with students at the beginning of the year, in terms of getting them acclimated, you know, and learning all of the different tools that we need them to learn in the schedule and so forth. But it is more of a schedule built into the in-person instruction when the hybrid resumes in October. So, Ms. Smith, I don't know if you want to add anything to that or not.
I think at this time that covers it, Ms. Fox.
Okay.
Anything else from board members? Okay. With that, our next item is board forum. The agenda indicates that we were, oh, I'm sorry, Mrs. Korn, did you have a question?
No, wait, do we have a discussion of board forum? I am not looking at the.
Yeah, so with what we're slated for, if time allows, was to discuss the district goals. So
I had something I wanted to say during board forum, but I can say it after the district goals if you like.
Well, let's just pose the question to the board. This wasn't if time allows. So if people, you know, we're at 9:52, Some of us have been on a Zoom call since 5 o'clock. So if there's no urgent need to discuss district goals tonight, we can do that in September. Is that correct, Mr. Markarian?
Sure, that's fine.
Any strong feelings one way or the other? Okay, all those in favor of moving it to September, raise your hand. All right, I see a lot of hands. Okay, so we're going to push that to September. And with that, board member comments for board forum, go right ahead. Mrs. Korn, you had something?
Yeah, I just have something I'm going to read because, this whole thing has been very difficult. And we talk about like trying to get the kids back to school and the pandemic, but the mental health, I'm more afraid of not going back to school than staying home. Like the mental health it's a real thing. It's real. It's affecting families and it's not good. So I'm just reading this, but it's my opinion. I'm speaking for myself, not for the board. I don't want to, and I do understand why we're waiting till October to go back. I understand how we have things we have to do in the buildings. It's very important. But I would like to start by thanking the administrators, the support staff, the teachers, the nurses, the custodians, and all the other people that are working tirelessly to try to get us back to school. I said in September, but now we're going back in October. I have my fingers crossed. It's been enormously difficult and thankless task, thanks to the complete lack of quality leadership we have in Trenton. This administration's penchant for signing executive orders, giving school guidelines that are almost impossible to meet, while absolving themselves of any actual governing has been a disappointment, to put it mildly, and put a lot of pressure on our local people to make decisions that pit us all against each other. It seems like they would rather pit like neighbor against neighbor and teachers against parents, all the while letting like the kids take the blame for schools not opening in September. When we started out in this pandemic lockdown, the state health commissioner, Judith Persicelli, was asked if she was worried about she was going to get the coronavirus. She said, and I'll quote, I'm definitely going to get it. We all are. I'm just waiting. She went on to say that it will probably be mild. She'll feel sick for a few days and hopefully get better. We were asked to flatten the curve to make sure the hospitals were not overwhelmed. We accomplished that in spades, and somehow the message has morphed into eradicating the virus, which is an impossible goal. So it's the same for kids starting school. If we're looking for 100% safety to open schools, then we are setting ourselves up for failure. There's nothing in life that is 100% safe. We take calculated risk all day long, every day. The virus is not something that can be locked away. It is here and it's not disappearing anytime soon. So, unfortunately, the CDC numbers have shown that children have very low risk of dying from the virus. By current measures, even less than the flu. Similarly, the risk for healthy adults under 55 is relatively low. So I really believe we need students back in the classroom, on the ball fields, in their clubs and practice rooms. Their academic and mental health depends on it. Hearing stories of children here in town testing positive and subsequently being shamed for having done something wrong rather than checked on to see how they're doing, it's frightening to me. And it's like we are losing our humanity because we're so afraid. The virus is turning people against each other, and we've lost much of our empathy. And it's understandable given that's all we had to think about for the last 5 months. The virus is real, it can kill people, and it can make others very ill. But we have to use the data available to assess the risks and to do the right thing for all our kids. I understand the concerns expressed about going back to school when our buildings aren't ready, like I said before. But I truly believe that if we don't open the schools, we're gonna be sending a message to the kids that they are the problem. That's my belief. All the talk of the kids being super spreaders, they're killing their grandparents, they're being irresponsible. I can't even imagine that's not having a negative impact on them. So most people will recover from the virus. We know how to keep our most vulnerable populations as safe as possible. So I would hate to see our kids' future mental health become the collateral damage of the decisions we make out of fear today. Now, this is not a reflection of what we're trying to do in our town. It's just like the pressures from what we're getting from the state. We're just not getting good leadership. And it's really, the impact is real. And I don't want to, and so I just had to say that because it's impacting my family. And I see and the kids, it's just not good. And the fear, and I'm just hoping that we can all get beyond it and start school in October. I'm praying so that the kids have something to look forward to, something to ground them, that they're starting school and they're going to have something to look forward to. Thank you.
Any other board members? Have anything they'd like to say during board forum? No one? Okay, then at this point, we're up to adjournment. If anyone would like to make a motion. Mrs. Beckman and Mr. Salmon. All in favor? Okay, that's everybody, Mr. McLaughlin. Thanks, everyone. Have a good night and stay safe.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
Good night.